manager saying let's roll to our consent and action review this afternoon. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Let's begin with our introductions, and we'll start with Ms. Brown.
Well, it certainly is a pleasure to be here, Mayor.
Thank you.
Tijuana Brown, Charlotte City Council, District 3. Hello, everybody.
Good evening. I am going to say Happy Eagles Black History Month, as well as Kendrick Lamar's Black History Month. I am LaWanda Mayfield. I serve you on Charlotte City Council as an at-large member.
Charles Regard, District 6.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
By Lyles, Mayor.
Dimple Ajmera at large.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, District 4, and I want to wish my grandbaby a happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Okay.
Anthony Fox, Interim City Attorney.
Billy Tons, Deputy City Clerk.
It's back.
Okay. Mr. Driggs, would you like to introduce yourself?
Ed Driggs, District 7. Good evening.
All right, thank you very much. So now, I think Tark has already, did you already prove?
Charles Regard, District 6.
That's what it is, yeah, so that's okay. All right, let's move it on. All right, so are there any consent items for a separate vote or comment? Ms. Johnson.
I'd like to pull item number 34, please.
Okay, 34. For a separate vote or for notes? Or just a comment? Separate vote. All right. And item 43. Okay. Anyone else? Ms. Mayfield, yes?
Thank you. So we do have a speaker tonight.
Yes.
So are we going to pull out 37, 38, and 39? Or do you need me to add that into my?
My understanding, and Mr. Mr. Anthony, if you would remind us, this is a lawyer, and my understanding is he would like to speak at one time on all three items.
Right. Yeah, Mayor and Council, you're correct. This item is related to condemnations to be filed by the city with regards to a public purpose for acquisition of property that's important for the public good. The attorney in this matter has been notified that this item is on your agenda for dinner agenda, and that action may be taken by the council prior to his comments, and he's aware of that.
So then I would like to pull 37, 38, and 39 for discussion and vote, because I think that's a challenge if we move forward with a decision in this room, but then when we get downstairs, he'll be able to speak in this room.
Yes,
so
he's
I just
able.
wanted to make sure that there was the opportunity to hear, but just for the sake of the records, then I will pull 37, 38, 39 for separate vote.
Okay, thank you. All right, so do I have item number 43 as well as 37, 38, and 39? Anyone else have anything that they'd like to have separately? All right, so the clerk understands and has the information that she needs, and I'd like to address Mr. Odom. Yes. If you would join us at the dais up here, so that we can have you on the record, and you are going to address Charlotte Water property transactions, Davidson Eastern Rocky River Sanitary Sewer Outfall is item number 37. Item 38 is Charlotte Water property transactions, Rocky River Sanitary Sewer Outfall, and the same for item 39. Mr. Odom, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem, City Council members. My name is Tommy Odom. I'm an attorney here. I represent the May family, the Hennenhausen family, and the Davis family. And I emailed all of the city council members with a summary of what I was going to say tonight, and I want to make it short because I know that you're busy. But we believe this is a very serious matter, that we believe to condemn these three families' properties for a private developer would be unlawful and unconstitutional. And we are asking the city council to take a stand today and vote not to do that, and instead have the developer who has some 50-acre project in the town of Davison to go and acquire what he needs in the free market like everyone else does. And that we think that doing it the way this, under this program, when it appears to us from a public records request that this sewer line some 2,000 feet across these three families' properties was not even in the SIP or was not funded by the SIP until the developer came knocking at Charlotte Water's door, would be impermissible, unlawful, and unconstitutional. And we would ask that y'all deny that tonight. And I'm here for any questions if anybody would like to ask, or I can also send my packet to you again. But I know this is my only time to speak.
All right, thank you, Mr. Odom. Mr. Fox, what was our next step?
I think we have
in this
Thomas
regard?
Powers here on behalf of Charlotte Water to address the condemnation actions that are on your consent agenda.
Mr. Odom, I know it's really tough to have those big shoes to fill, but we want you to know that Fountain was one of our very best, so thank you very much.
Well, I thank you, and that warms my heart.
Mayor, members of council, just want to kind of give you an understanding in regards to this matter. The properties that are being represented by Mr. Odom are part of a larger project that Charlotte Water is undertaking in the town of Davison. This is a actual project that was recommended and requested by the town of Davison in 2016. And so as part of this phase one aspect for the Rocky River CIP project, we are crossing some of the projects that Mr. Odom alluded to, as well as multiple other projects as part of this development for a pipeline. Just to make sure you're fully aware that this developer is doing this pursuant to a reimbursement agreement that the city of Charlotte through Charlotte Water has entered. As part of this development reimbursable, they are actually procuring the necessary infrastructure, building that, and then the city of Charlotte is reimbursing them under that agreement after the fact. Now, again, since this is part of our CIP project, it is my legal opinion that this does meet the public purpose standard necessary for condemnation under the North Carolina Constitution. As Mr. Odom is requesting to you tonight, he is alleging that the use of the private developer for this project is what is causing an improper purpose under the Constitution, and it's my legal opinion, and after my review of this matter, that it does meet the public purpose that is necessary under state law for this council to vote on the matter to allow for the condemnation to proceed. I will also highlight as a separate matter that notwithstanding your vote tonight, the staff of Charlotte Water, as well as the city attorney's office, will continue to engage Mr. Odom and his clients in regards to the just compensation that is required under the North Carolina Constitution to pay for the necessary easements that are going to be obtained by the city of Charlotte. So I want to just kind of summarize again. One, this is constitutional from the city attorney's office standpoint, but also that we will continue to have engagement and discussion with the actual attorney, Mr. Odom, and others in regards to obtaining fair compensation related to the easements that we're obtaining at this time.
Madam Mayor, if I can just add to that, what is before you tonight is the initiation of the condemnation process. That process is initiated by the filing of a complaint declaration, taking a notice of deposit. The amount that is being identified as fair compensation, just compensation is how it's really termed, will be deposited into the court and will be available to the property owners at that time. The property owner will have an opportunity in the proceeding to challenge the public purpose. It was not, so you do not have to concern yourself with that. Mr. Odom will have the opportunity to raise these concerns at the appropriate time in a judicial setting.
Thank you very much. All right, I have two people that have raised their hands, Ms. Watlington and Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question, notwithstanding what I just heard from the attorney, I just wanted to understand a little bit more clearly, what is the impact of not including these parcels in the work that the city is trying to get done here? Like, are they, and I know we don't necessarily have maps, but are they square in the middle of the development, or are they on the outer edge? I'm just curious to get.
These parcels that are part of the actual pipeline route are at the, I would say, the rear of the property line. They're not in the middle of the property line or directly at the front of the road frontage. This is towards the rear. Actually, the properties in question are, I think, abutting Cabarrus County, from what I recall. And so this pipeline is, again, at the rear of the property, closer to the Cabarrus County line, running down again from the top part of Davison all the way southbound at the rear of these properties.
Okay, and then my last question is, you mentioned condemnation. We would be initiating the condemnation process. If I'm understanding that correctly, what specifically is required for condemnation? I just want, not for condemnation, but what does it mean that something needs to be condemned? Like, what condition is it in?
That's a separate question.
Okay.
When you're talking about condemning, I think you're referencing the actual minimal housing standards for housing code. This is not a situation where we're condemning because it's dilapidated or deteriorated. This is a situation where we're using eminent domain to acquire property in an involuntary setting. As Mr. Fox alluded to, and as I stated before, this action that you're taking tonight is an administrative action, but it does not preclude ongoing negotiations to actually reach a fair solution to the question of how much money is appropriate for this actual taking of the property.
Thank you.
Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me. So, Mr. Powers, I want to make sure that I'm understanding. So we're utilizing our process through the CIP for a private developer when we say the market is going to do what the market does. And what I heard from Mr. Odom is that for his clients, the concern is that opposed to this private developer going through the market process of having to negotiate with these individual homeowners, our process is allowing for eminent domain to gain access to this property. And then on the back end, if we were to move forward with this tonight through condemnation, then they then have to fight and go back and forth in court, which is something that could take months and or year. And in the meantime, could the development still happen if they have a challenge with it?
So there's a couple of points here I need to raise. Number one, in regards to the use of a private developer, the city of Charlotte has authority under state law to use private developers to build public infrastructure pursuant to reimbursement agreements. So when we're actually using this private developer to actually facilitate the CIP related to this pipeline, it is not just for the benefit of a private developer, it is for the benefit of the entire community as a whole. As I stated earlier, the town of Davison has requested this pipeline to be built to actually open up development in their community related to this first phase as well as the second phase as well. This is an area that they're targeting for further development, possibly in various forms, but this is not a private development in the sense of the pipe is being built for just one property or one person. If the city of Charlotte is involved in this type of project from a reimbursement standpoint, there is a public purpose, meaning we're opening up large tracts of land and possibly multiple tracts of land for future development that could be tied into that direct pipe. The only aspect about this is a question of whether we're using a private developer to actually expedite the project, which is in this case what we're doing, versus the city of Charlotte undertaking it directly themselves. But notwithstanding, the private developer issue, in my opinion, is a red herring because it does meet the public purpose test. We would not have entered into the agreement unless we are actually using the ratepayer dollars to have pipes in the ground that would benefit multiple properties for future development. What Mr. Odom is alluding to is a situation where a individual developer would use pipes in the ground to benefit their own single property. That is not the case. The city attorney's office would never authorize something of that nature because that would be unconstitutional in its entirety. This is why, again, I reiterate, it meets the public purpose test because it's multiple properties in the town of Davidson pursuant to their council resolution requesting of Angela Charles to build this infrastructure for their actual development. And so I don't want you to get focused on the developer piece because that's the red herring in the situation. What is really is ratepayer dollars are going to be spent to actually build infrastructure that Charlotte Water will own, Charlotte Water will maintain, that's going to be able to assist the community of Davidson with their growth and development going forward.
So I have a follow-up question that you may or may not be able to answer this. I don't know. I didn't notice if Ms. Charles is here or someone from, I think she might.
Ms. Charles is here.
She is in the corner. So I'm trying to understand. You said these properties happen to be at the end. So if these three are at the end versus stopping where you've already negotiated with some of the other property owners to redirect the piping, mainly because of what I want to understand and get it, what I want to have a better understanding is the what-ifs. So we are already and have received numerous concerns where development has happened close to residential community. And those individual homeowners now have had disturbances with our pipes in their yard that they are then told, this is your responsibility because it's in your yard. I'm trying to understand if we were to move forward in this condemnation, when they are not comfortable with where we are with this pricing, if we're going to force this, if something were to happen later, what happens? Who's then responsible?
Couple of things. In regards to the actual aspect of just compensation, as I alluded to, it can be negotiated directly between the parties. Myself, Mr. Odom, or any other attorney under the Charlotte Water team could actually negotiate that price and reach a resolution. I will say that we have multiple aspects of property acquisition, whether it's easements or actually fee simple, where we have directly negotiated and actually purchased the item without any need for condemnation. In this case, again, even with this council approving the item as requested tonight, Mr. Odom can negotiate that. As Mr. Fox also alluded to, if it goes to trial, a jury can make that determination as to the value of the property that is being obtained by Charlotte Water. At that point, Charlotte Water would then pay those necessary dollars and then will have ownership of that actual pipe and that location of land. So I think Sure. So just to kind of give you just the legal understanding, the aspects of the condemnation are either resolved voluntarily through negotiation or through a jury determination. The operational aspects that you're also alluding to, I think Ms. Charles can actually answer at this time.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening.
Welcome back. Thank you, Ms. Charles.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council Manager, Angela Charles, Director of Charlotte Water. Councilmember Mayfield, Charlotte Water will maintain the pipes going through these easements. So it sounds like to me you may be asking a question more related to storm water versus drinking water, and in this case, this is wastewater. What we're doing here is backbone infrastructure. That's what Charlotte Water funds through the capital program. And since 2018, these sewer lines were in our capital program. And so the agreements allow for items in our capital program to be put in the ground before we have it programmed for funding in our capital program. So that's what's happening here. We do have a resolution from the town of Davidson commissioners asking for this line. But in terms of, and it's multiple lines, it's 5,900 feet of wastewater, 15-inch and 12-inch that we will be installing in the town of Davidson. But in terms of maintenance, it will be maintained by the forces of Charlotte Water.
So if there's a wastewater backup, then that is maintained by Charlotte Water?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All 5,900 feet of this line will be maintained by folks.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Mr. Picard?
Yeah, real quick, I don't want to belabor the point, but I want to make sure I heard something correctly. Am I understanding this right? It's not end state being presented to us a problem because we know the eminent domain and there's a process in court to come where they can challenge that. I thought I heard Mr. Odom say that it was the process was circumvented in some way where the developer came late or after the initial scoping and then tried to insert this into it, whether it's 2,000 feet away or whatever was said, with the objective of using this whole process as a way to have that negotiation occur. One, am I understanding that correctly? Two, did this come late into the process? So because that might be different from our perspective. I agree, let the court handle all of that stuff if it meets the criteria, but was the criteria used after the initial scoping because the developer said, hey, let's do this, something was changed, and now all of a sudden it's in scope for the right-of-way acquisition? Did all this get scoped at the same time in the beginning, or did something happen through this process with the developer where this was brought into the fold?
Let me suggest, I know it may be important to you, but what I'm concerned about is that we've got potential litigation that's going on here, and we're getting way in the weeds. And I know Tommy well, this is providing free discovery for him.
I will
To go
withdraw
through
the
this
question
process. Thank
on
you.
that basis, but the one thing I would say is I want to make sure they're going to point to this body's decision during that process. And I want to make sure that we understood what it was we were.
Yeah, I think what you hear is you have your subject matter expert who runs your Charlotte Water that builds a sewer system that says that this can be a component of your sewer system and therefore provide for a public purpose.
I will defer my questions at that basis then.
Ms. Johnson? Ms. Johnson?
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think that Councilmember Bakari's question is important, and I also, I guess I'm concerned about approving it now and then working out the details later, especially if it could cost more to go to court to come to an agreement. I would think if we deferred this for another month or so, we could get the questions answered that Councilmember Bakari asked offline, and also maybe give the parties time to negotiate an agreed upon price. If the property owner is concerned about the amount of compensation offered, what could happen if we go to court, we're going to end up paying it anyway and just end up paying more because of time and legal cost. So I'd be willing to defer the vote if that's okay. Is there any harm in putting this off for another month, Ms. Charles or Mr. Jones?
Yes, there has been, up to this point, there have been months of negotiation. And so what I would ask this body to do is to move forward with this project. Reimbursable agreements, especially in areas that don't have water and wastewater, are common. And so one of the reasons we are here is that the real estate staff and the appraisers were not able to come to agreement on a price. And so I would ask this body to go ahead and approve it and let the process go through so that folks can continue to negotiate. But there's been ample time up to this point to negotiate and to come to agreement.
All right, Mr. Driggs.
So just to be clear, are we basically saying tonight that, in our opinion, this is a public interest project?
Absolutely.
And recognizing that a lot of stuff still gets worked out and that the rights of the owners are not abridged. All we're doing is saying we think this is, and we think it's appropriate for us to move to the next step.
Absolutely.
And on
Yes,
that
sir.
basis, I'll support it. Thank you.
Ms. Molina?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll just inject in that, first of all, this was a part of consent. So had the guy not, if the attorney hadn't come before us, this wouldn't even be a conversation, which is a bit of cause of concern for me, right? Because there's this greater implication that says, if someone hears something like condemnation or something like that, the end user understands that as like we're trying to take somebody's house from them and tear it down and stuff like that, despite there being all of these, explanations about what's actually happening. So I don't, I'm at a crossroad on what we do here. I think, especially with this being an open forum conversation, I would have much rather had this conversation as a council, maybe behind some closed doors, especially not without the public consumption. Let me make sure before somebody hit me with that and say that I'm saying we do it behind the door and undisclosed. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying where we could have, as a council, whether that's out loud or whatever, had some type of conversation where, we weren't giving free advice to the opposing attorney by asking our questions. I'd just like to get the questions answered so that we can go into this eyes wide open. So that's my concern right now.
I'm ready for a motion. This reminds me of one of our former city attorneys who used to say that, when you go to court, you probably are getting the best chance to get a resolution, because this will be with citizens and they'll be with the same kind of thing that you would have in court. So I just wonder if we may have some questions about when it happened or whatever, but basically, this is an opportunity for them to have a solution inside something, people that know a lot more than we do about judgments in court. So do I have a motion? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So I listened to my colleague's concern. A very delicate situation. If we know that Mr. Odom was going to be here tonight and he's on the agenda, then maybe what Councilmember Molina said would make the most sense. In a closed session, even though it's open to the public, we could have discussed it. Everything is open to the public. They're going to know anyway, whether we're in a closed session, the information that we discuss in the session is then released out. But it sounds like in this situation, with some of the language used and with the public watching, I don't know. I don't know how to vote. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm kind of stuck with the language that's went around the room. And so in order to be extremely authentic and transparent and fair, it sounds like that we're not ready to vote.
Well, I think I have a motion, so
let's see what the motion is.
I think that's probably the best way to resolve this. Mr. Graham, you have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I think we've had a good discussion about the concerns. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Anyone else? Okay. All right, what's our next? No, we're coming back. Let's go around and do opposed. Okay. All right, what's our next step, Mr. Fox?
That motion fails.
It failed.
Motion.
Okay.
Motion to defer till we have some answers. If you can prepare a memo, like you have done, Mr. Fox, on other
Second.
matters, before this comes in front of us. I think there needs to be, if you can provide background information for council to be prepared. I feel like the council doesn't have all the answers. So if you can get all the answers before we have to make a decision on this.
Do you want to include a date and time certain in your motion to your
Yes.
next business meeting of the council? Could, Ms. Charles, can we have those answers by then? I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I
That's-
made a motion.
that's what
She
we
just made a motion
Motion
to
to defer.
defer. It hasn't been seconded yet.
Wait a minute. Did she decide to defer to your next council meeting?
Yes, the
That's-
next business meeting is going to be on 24th.
Point of order. So the motion failed?
Yes.
So the motion failed, so we're just going to bring it back. It's not a
No, this is-
deferral, it
The
failed.
motion was not a deferral. Your motion was to
4, 5,
approve.
6.
The motion to
She's
approve
doing deferral.
did not garner the majority vote. A new motion was made because there was no motion on the floor
Okay.
by Ms. Dimple.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, we have a motion, and we have a second. I think I saw the second over here, but let me be sure. I did second. That's right, deferral. Yes. Okay, so we have that before us. Did you have a question, Ms. Watlington?
I did. So there's somewhere in our rules of procedure where it talks about a matter not coming back for 60 days if it failed, but I just wanted to make sure that because this was a motion that included a time frame, that that was within the rules.
Mr. Fox?
Now you're challenging me. I did give you copies of your rules. Now.
Where's
I've gotta
those rules
figure
on our
out where
page
in
now?
the rule that is.
Well, and I will say this, I think that because there is a motion, if that motion passes, then that will address whatever the motion was that was associated with that subject. So I think we're okay, but I just was making sure.
It's fine.
I thought the rule applied to when it was sent back for count to a committee, and then it had to come back within 60 days. If it doesn't come back within 60 days, then you're free to on the motion.
All right, so we have a motion to defer, and we have a second. All in favor, please raise your hands. That is the majority. Anyone opposed? We have one person opposed. Thank you very much. So we'll be back on the very next business meeting with more information, I think. Yes.
February.
February, yes. It's February the 24th. Today's the 10th. No, it's the 10th.
The next business meeting.
Yes. Okay. All right. So now let's go to the consent items, I think, that we need to do. All right, so that covers Ms. Mayfield's request for 37, 38, and 39. They'll come back under deferral. Now let's move to, we have one other, item 43, which was requested by,
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, what, Ms. Johnson, which one was it?
34. I thought it was 33. All right, which? Ms. Johnson, you were 34? All right, let's go with 34. Sorry. Dyslexic over here. 34. All right, hold on. Item 34, approve the titles. Is that the correct one?
Yeah.
Approve the titles, motions, and votes reflected in the clerk's record as the minutes of June 3rd, June 10th, June 17th, June 17th, June 24th, August 19th, August 26th, September 3, September 9, September 16. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
All right, we have a second. All right, is there any discussion?
Yes, just the discussion. I wanted to get an update on where we were as far as the backlog of the minutes. Just get an update from the city clerk on where we are on the backlog, how soon we can expect the next batch of minutes, and also what is the expectation for the minutes. When I went online today, I noticed some of the zoning minutes and audio are available, and committee meetings and video and audio and minutes. And I just wanted to know what the expectation was for availability. We can get that information later. I know you weren't prepared for that. We can get it later, or you can give the answer now. But what's the expectation? Should we expect, or should the public expect that all of these zoning meetings and committee meetings will all be available via video or audio? And how soon will we have the rest of the minutes? You want to?
So for the city council meetings, not the committee meetings, Marie can probably talk about the committee meetings, but where we are now is the vendor who is contracted to do our meeting minutes. They're working in October, and they'll finish through the rest of the year of 2024 on March 24th of 2025. So you can expect to get all of 2024 city council meeting minutes, not the committee meetings. Marie can speak to that one.
Madam Mayor, may I?
Yes, please.
So, Ms. Johnson, for the committee meetings, we have a Facebook page and a YouTube channel, and they're available live and then saved. So they're available both those places. Actually, the actual business meetings are as well, but all the committee meetings are there.
Are you sure about the committee meetings on Facebook? I know they're on YouTube.
I'm 90% sure, but
They're
I'll
not
follow
on
up. But
Facebook,
definitely on YouTube, yes. And we'll definitely follow up to make sure they're still saved on Facebook as well.
And then if we could just get some clarification, you can give me this information later, what's going to be expected on that page? You know, some meetings, there's video, audio, meeting summary, meeting minutes, and I'd just like to know what should be expected.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Ajmira?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I just want to make sure, Maria, I understood this correctly. Committee meetings, do they not have written meeting notes, meeting minutes like we have for council meetings?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because you said something about online, so that version is there, but I'm talking about written meeting minutes.
Yes, they're not verbatim, but yes, ma'am, we do. We have action minutes, yes.
Yeah, so I guess what's the timeline for that? It doesn't have, you don't have to give it to me today, but in a follow-up report?
So for your committee, we always try to make sure they're posted prior to the next committee meeting, but.
Got it. So it's
but
actually
we'll double check with the
current.
other committees. Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. So now I'd like to turn it over to the manager for an overview
Did
of
we,
our.
have you ever voted?
Item 43.
We didn't vote.
Oh, we didn't vote on the motion for defer, wait a minute. For 34, the minutes, sorry. Okay, all in favor of item 34, please raise your hands. So she made the motion. Is there anyone opposed? All right, thank you. That passes. So now I'm going to turn it over to the manager for action review discussion.
So thank you, Mayor, members of council. I want to start off by asking the clerk, has anybody signed up for any items outside of
Mr.
what's
Oakley.
happening in 267?
Not that I'm aware of.
Awesome,
I can
thank you.
double-check.
Okay, so I just start with that because tonight we are bookending some of the conversations we've had around public safety, and we have a number of outside guests. And so, Mayor, because there's no public forum, I would hope that the council would have a robust conversation and not end at 6:30, because we don't have a public forum and we don't have anybody signed up to speak for anything in addition. So I just set that out, okay? Great.
So the next portion
Manager.
of our meeting would be items that we would have a policy vote on.
We have speakers on a couple items, item 37, 38, and 39, but it's the same person.
We did that already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so awesome. So I just want to make sure that you can have a robust conversation and not feel that you have to stop at 6:30, if that's okay, Mayor.
Yeah, so
Okay.
why don't we shoot for 7?
Well, so, thank you. So I will turn it over to Sean Heath. I'm very excited about tonight, mainly because of the collaboration that's been going on within this community for a number of years around public safety and violence as a public health crisis. What I've heard from this council since the annual strategy meeting is just this desire to have more collaboration. And I believe you're going to see it tonight. I think we have a row of doctors lined up there. And I'm very proud of the work that has occurred. But having said that, Sean has all of the script. He's moving forward. And I just wanted to, thank you guys for just being here tonight. Is that okay, Mayor? I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
All right, Sean, let's go with this. We're looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Lyles and Manager Jones. Go ahead and jump right in. This has been the schedule over the last 2.5 months since the city manager initiated this multi-part series around public safety. We've had multiple departments, leaders across the organization provide some perspective starting on November 25th. Tonight's a nice bookend for this series focused on violence as a public health crisis. And we've got a lot of ground to cover tonight. We obviously have some guests here to move through the presentation materials. So I'll be quick with the table setting part, but I wanted to make a few key points before we jump into some of the details. First of which is this concept of violence as a public health crisis is certainly not new to the city, not new to the county. not new to council. If you go back to early 2020, a lot of conversations at what was then called the Safe Communities Committee, leading to conversations with full council during January, February, and March of 2020. And ultimately, the city adopted what's referred to as this framework to address violence using a public health approach. So the purpose here, which I'll read quickly, city, county partners, and community work together to reduce violence, increase economic opportunity, and build healthier, more resilient communities. That's what was adopted by council in 2020, as were these 5 building blocks, which are summarized here. And as the city manager alluded in the opening remarks, there's a real heavy emphasis here on collaboration across agencies, collaboration with other community partners. And I think there's also an acknowledgement that while policing is clearly a cornerstone in our public safety efforts at all times, this is intended to be a much broader, holistic view around public safety. What was not included in all of the information that council looked at in early 2020 are these activation examples at the bottom, because we thought it might be helpful to very quickly provide some perspective on all the great work that's happened across the community over the past 5 years. So when this framework was adopted in early 2020, starting with intergovernmental collaboration, there's a lot of discussion around, wouldn't we as a community be better off with a community-wide comprehensive violence reduction strategy? A significant body of work was launched, and that comprehensive strategy was in fact forward with input from senior city staff, and senior city staff have been integrating with Mecklenburg County over the last couple of years. For those of you that serve on the Housing, Safety, and Community Committee, we had a specific conversation about this strategy in committee last year when we were focused on the juvenile crime policy referral. So you will hear more about that from Dr. Washington momentarily. On community collaboration in priority areas, the emphasis here in 2020 was, wouldn't it be beneficial to have targeted approaches in certain geographies? The initial conversations then were around 4 hotspot areas, and that ultimately evolved into what we now know as corridors of opportunity, which in a way is easy to take for granted 5 years later. But at one point, it was actually just an idea on the drawing board. And here we are 5 years later. The numbers change month by month. I believe most recently, the total investment in corridors exceeds $200 million, with over half of that investment coming from the private sector. So here, a very specific example of intentional strategies and collaboration and funding leverage that have achieved some great benefits for the city and the county. On interrupt violence, the real emphasis in early 2020 was, let's identify evidence-based programming that we really think can help move the needle in the community. Hospital-based violence intervention was one. We have our partners from Atrium here tonight to discuss an update on that work. And then violence interruption through ultimately what we called the Alternatives to Violence program was a second opportunity, which Dr. Stewart will provide some perspective on tonight. Invest in community-led efforts. You've already heard an update on the Safe Charlotte work and recommendations, and the Safe Charlotte grants are kind of our signature investment under this particular building block. And then use data and evidence. A few years ago, there was a lot of work done collaboratively to develop what we have now, which is a community violence data dashboard. So members of the community, any of our agency partners can review community violence data all the way down to the neighborhood profile area level. In terms of tonight, as I mentioned, Dr. Washington is going to provide perspective on his Office of Violence Prevention and the Way Forward plan, which you have in front of you. Atrium will then get into Project Boost, which is the hospital-based violence intervention program that's been in place for a few years. We'll round it out with Rakeshila focused on the Alternatives to Violence program. And then at the very end, I will come back up and talk a little bit about what's next. So you've gone through this 6-part series, and I think we've been asking that question, you know, where do you want to go now that we're done with this particular series? We've got a couple ideas and recommendations, but we need your feedback. So that's what I'll do at the end. Having said that, I'll now turn it over to Dr. Washington. You can either, right there's the arrow, or I can click it for you.
I got it. Perfect, thanks. I've been up here a time or two, just not for this audience. Good evening, City Council, Madam Mayor. It's really great to see you all this evening. I don't get to talk with you all in this format very often, but it's always my pleasure to come when invited to do so. I am Bernard Washington. For those who don't know me, I'm the county's public health director. So I have been in that role since December of 2021. Tonight, look forward to talking a little bit about our Office of Violence Prevention that is both a partnership with the County Health Department, the county at large, but works very closely with the City of Charlotte as well as our law enforcement partners, as well as a whole host of community partners who are so critical for us and the work that we get done in this space. All right, so just to give you a quick snapshot, I only have about 10 minutes, I think, but I look forward to answering any questions tonight. But to talk a little bit about, first, what the Office of Violence Prevention is, why we created it. Many of you may know Tracy Campbell, who used to be our leader of that office, who has now moved on to greater pastures as a result of the great work that she was able to do here in Mecklenburg. I'll then talk a little bit about sort of what it means in general just to be an Office of Violence Prevention. Actually, I'll talk about that first. And why we consider violence a public health issue. And then I'll talk in detail a little bit about the plan and some of the progress that we've made over the last couple of years, as well as some of our partnerships directly with the city and the work that we're doing. Across this country and here in North Carolina, I think there's a growing acknowledgement and recognition that that violence has an impact on the community's health, not just in terms of individuals being directly impacted by violence itself, whether it be injury or death, but entire communities are impacted by violence that happens because it tends to be concentrated in communities that experience that violence on a regular basis. That has a whole host of direct and indirect impacts on the health and well-being of a community. And what we mean by violence as a public health issue is that we have to acknowledge that while law enforcement, as has already been said tonight, is a hallmark and a critical component to our ability to be able to respond to violence, there are other things we can do to both prevent violence from happening on the first place, to keep law enforcement out, but also to make sure that when violence does occur, we're tending to the community as a whole and not just the patient who's directly impacted by either a gun or whatever the weapon might be in the case of violence. It also takes the posture that violence can be prevented. And so it takes this, at its very core, is that we can stop violence before it begins. We all know violence is cyclical. It's deeply rooted in community. It's not a new issue that just popped up and we can't just put a Band-Aid on it. And it will take a lot of effort for us to address those root causes, which are often economic, opportunity, lack of opportunity, and of course the pervasiveness of criminal activity that happens in some of our communities. It also, we look in public health for sort of a tiered approach to prevention. I won't go into all the particulars about primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention, but basically it just means that we take every opportunity to intervene before somebody is involved, either as a perpetrator or a victim of violence in the work that we do. This could look like educational programs, interventional programs, or even, as we all know, the role that behavioral health and mental health play in what happens in terms of violence in our community. This is a graphic from the Way Forward, which is our community plan, and I'll talk a little bit more about how we got to this plan in just a few moments here. But in long and short of it is that there are a number of types of interventions that we can do, some of which you'll hear in detail about tonight. On the very primary prevention side, sort of at the top of this pyramid, we're thinking about how do we stop people from ever getting into or ever being exposed to violence in the first place? How do we make sure our youth have opportunities for outlet, they're receiving a quality education, and they're receiving supportive services as needed? In the secondary prevention tier, that's where folks have some risk for violence, whether because of their neighborhood, where they live, or some involvement in certain activities. And so we think about programs like violence interruption programs, hospital-based programs that try to intervene when someone comes in as a victim of violence to reduce retaliation and those kinds of activities. And then lastly is sort of tertiary prevention, which is this whole notion that people who are involved in violent crimes, whether as victims or perpetrators, the data show have a likelihood that they'll be involved in something else later. So how do we stop once we know that a person's at greater risk? And that could look like restorative justice programs like some of you all may know we do in the county on the criminal justice services side, or reentry programs for people who are coming back from incarceration. So when the county initially started the work on violence prevention, it was started initially as a partnership with the city as well as our law enforcement partners, and we established what actually ended up being the very first Office of Violence Prevention in the state of North Carolina. This was in 2019, and the first plan, as Sean has already said, was to lay out sort of a community level plan that would allow us to bring together all the important partners, including law enforcement, but also our social services partners, our county and city agencies, to be able to facilitate facilitate not just the law enforcement strategies, but these 3 tiers of prevention that would help us do a better job of trying to reduce the likelihood that violent acts would occur in our communities. We also wanted to make sure that there was infrastructure and resources invested in our ability to evaluate what was working and what wasn't working, and bring to bear some of the best researchers to help us make sure that as we are making those investments, any new investments, that they're making good progress and having the impact that we intend to have. And so that started the Office of Violence Prevention. Since that time, there are several across the state, including a state office that was just established about 1.5 years ago. So being an Office of Violence Prevention does not mean that the Health Department is responsible for all violence or reducing violence by itself. It just means that we sit at the center of an ecosystem of organizations and partners who can help us to be able to both understand what's happening in the community, but also make sure that we're building infrastructure that's lasting to be able to have systems for prevention in our community that are a complement to what our partners in law enforcement are doing. And that's where this whole array of partners have come into play over the course of the last 2.5 years. And so in addition to the city and the county working closely together, we have federal funding, we have some funding from other agencies across the state. We also have an advisory body of community organizations, as well as community partners who are advising us as we move forward with implementation. We have resources from Northeastern and the University of Charlotte and Common Data Good to help us both maintain that data dashboard that Sean spoke to, but also to evaluate some of the initiatives that we have invested in for impact. And then there's a whole host of this work that really is at the heart of how we get to prevention, and that's our community members. So when the plan was first created, Tracy at that time was an office of one, and she went around every neighborhood in Charlotte to host meetings, to have conversations with people, and to ensure that the stakeholders who are impacted every day by violence had a voice in this work, and that voice was uplifted. And they actually set the priorities that are outlined in this plan. This was not driven by myself or the county manager or the city manager. The entire objectives that were outlined in this initial plan came from those conversations with our residents, with community leaders, actual community leaders, and folks at some of the nonprofits that we partner with. To Tracy's credit, that work happened over the course of almost 12 to 16 months to make sure that we kept ourselves honest in developing a plan that not just we had stake in, but that our residents also had some stake in as well. There are 5 aims in the plan. I won't have time tonight to talk through all 5 of them, but there are 2 overarching goals that basically, with our goal of reducing violence by 10%, specifically gun-related violence over the next 5 years. There are 5 core areas. There are 21 evidence-based strategies. We've implemented a number of them, and so I'm going to talk just quickly about a few of the highlights of things that have happened, and then you'll hear more about a couple of the specific strategies from my colleagues that are going to speak this evening from both the healthcare system and the city side. First and foremost, as Sean has mentioned earlier, one of the most important things we needed to do was to build infrastructure so that the county wasn't doing one thing, the city was doing another, law enforcement was doing another, and our community-based organizations were kind of all doing whatever they wanted. And that really was why we decided to form both the advisory committee for the Way Forward, which is made up of 50 local advisors who represent community partners, residents, community-based organizations to help guide this work, as well as, really importantly, is this violence prevention core team, and that's made up of myself, the city manager, the county manager, the chief of police, the sheriff, as well as representatives from the CMS side as well, because we recognize our education partners are really important. That core team was formed back in 2020 to make sure that we also were making coordinated and collaborative decisions across government agencies, and that we were co-investing where necessary and not duplicating investments across both the county, specifically the county and the city, and that there was a executive level insight to what was happening so that those decisions could be made quickly and without a lot of back and forth and up and down the chain. Lastly, one of the things that our community members asked us for was a way to instill youth voice in all of this work because, of course, they are the next generation and unfortunately are being impacted by violence every single day in our community. And so our team established a Youth Advisory Council, which has over 100 youth that are participating who also provide their perspective to us about what we can and should be doing to address violence. And some of their recommendations you'll see represented in some of the strategies I'll talk about here in just a second. We have been working quickly just to raise awareness about this issue and to use multimedia, social media, and other forms of media as a tool to help us get people to understand why this is an everybody issue and not just people who live in certain zip codes. So we have a number of awareness campaigns. As you all know, we had a series of really tragic accidental deaths that involved children, and so we had a very targeted campaign focused on making sure that people were storing guns safely in the community. We have had a number of young kids' lives lost as a result of that. We've also started a very significant gun lock distribution program that has distributed more than 1,000 gun locks in the community, and we still have a large supply that we are making available to residents at a number of various venues across the community. The Not Another campaign was a community-wide campaign. It was on CATS buses and other places in social media. And then the last thing I'll mention is these clean graffiti campaigns, which we've put around all the CMS schools that have been impacted by violence to basically say these are gun-safe zones. And so they spray paint the sidewalks to basically try to designate those areas as safe. Again, it's a physical cue to let people know that they're in an area that we need to keep safe because kids are there. I'm moving fast, so just stay with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. We also launched the Peacekeepers Academy. This was a direct recommendation or request from community partners. We have a number of hardworking nonprofits. Some are nonprofits, some are just mom and pop that are working every day to help us in making opportunity possible for residents, whether it be through mentorship or other kinds of resources for families that they provide. But they didn't have all the tools they needed to either be official organizations, to do business with the county, to do business, to write for grants, to be able to manage and demonstrate impact. And so we started Peacekeepers Academies, which has graduated 22 organizations and provided a lot of resource to them to kind of start up as agencies. Peacekeepers is a training. It provides a number of not just information about managing finances and those kinds of things, but also helps those agencies understand what best practice looks like in violence prevention, and had a whole host of experts from around the country actually to come and teach folks here in Charlotte how to approach it. And so we're proud to continue this work as well. And each of those agencies also received a small grant to help seed them, which hopefully will get them ready to be ready to apply for a Safe Charlotte grant as well in the future. A number of activities happening on the youth front. Access mental health services virtually at no cost. And so that is being supported by the county's ARPA allocations and will be launched in February of this year. And in March of this year, we're having a Youth Violence Prevention Summit that will bring together youth from around the county at a park and rec facility to help us, again, continue to plan what we should be doing to better reach youth in this conversation. We had an art campaign and a number of other things, and this will help us, again, continue to move that forward. All right, I'm going to skip this one because it's mostly about alternatives to violence, which has been a co-investment of both the county and the city, both to get launched as well as implement. And I know Dr. Stewart's going to talk about that in just a second, as well as we do have now interruption programs at both of our health systems. And again, this is a lot of work that's happened over the course of just 3 years, which I think is a huge deal for the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County to say that we've made this kind of intentional investment. I will also echo, though, that none of this is going to change the situation overnight. There is no simple answer to violence prevention, and we have to do all of these things and continue to do them continuously to be able to lessen the responsibility on our law enforcement partners. You know, violence is cyclical, and it does have a lot of root causes, and those root causes like poverty and opportunity are not fixed overnight. These really are interventions that allow us to make headway while we continue to address economic mobility in our community. And with that, I'll pass it to the team at Atrium. Thank you.
Good evening, you all. I'm thankful to be on this platform. This feels brand new to me. I am Brittany Brown. I'm the program manager for Atrium Health's hospital-based violence intervention program. And I'm joined with Dr. Morgan Maxwell, my colleague, and we're going to talk really briefly on how Project Boost addresses violence as a public health crisis in the hospital standpoint. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our inception and where we came from. So our original pilot came in 2021, thanks to a grant from the City of Charlotte. We received $250,000 in combination with a matching donation in kind from Atrium Health, which is now Advocate Health. Total, we had $500,000 to start our program. It was to last us for 2 years. We have been able to extend that all the way out to 2025. So we're still using those current funds, and we have recently been awarded federal funding, thank you to Congresswoman Alma Adams, in the amount of $963,000, which is hopefully going to get us out until 2028 to extend our program. We are looking to hire new staff and extend the services that we offer. So our current funding has allowed us to hire 2 staff, myself, and then we have 1 intervention specialist who's in our hospital currently seeing patients about 9 to 5 hours, Monday through Friday. So as mentioned, our official name is Project Boost, Boost standing for Building Optimal Outcomes for Survivors of Trauma. This is us at our annual Youth Violence Prevention Conference hosted by Atrium Health. That is our fearless leader, Dr. David Jacobs, who helped get our program off the ground years and years ago. We are super proud of what we do with that conference and beyond, so I definitely wanted to add that pic. So currently we have 4 main goals that we focus on for our program. The first being identifying the needs of our participants. We're currently doing that through a social determinants of health interview that we do with each patient. Sometimes it's done bedside, sometimes it's done after discharge just to determine what their specific needs are. Our second goal is to connect patients with community resources based on the needs identified, and that can be anything from housing, financial supports, employment, mentorship. There's an array of things we hope to support them with. Thirdly, we'd like to grow our community connections. We are currently using a community resource hub where we have thousands of organizations housed that we can look online to identify and connect our individuals with. We also use a lot of word of mouth based on connections that we've made in the community for connections. We know there's a lot of work doing in the city, and we want to make sure we have our hand in as much as we possibly can. Our fourth goal right now is reducing recidivism, simply meaning we don't want our patients coming back for the same reasons. As you know, someone who is experiencing violence is about 4 times likely to come back to a hospital system for similar injuries, usually more severe. So we have a wonderful data team right now who is leading our efforts, Dr. Morgan Maxwell. So I wanted her to talk a little bit about our recidivism efforts and how we are collecting our data.
Thank you, Brittany. Good evening, everybody. My name is Morgan Maxwell. I am a senior evaluation scientist, a part of the Impact Evaluation Grants Management team. We are embedded within the Community Health and Prevention Department of Advocate Health, or Atrium Health, and we are also within the National Center for Health Equity. Essentially, we're a technical assistance team that supports our programs with evaluating their progress. We support data collection, monitoring, we distribute reports, and we're essentially supporting them with improving the program and making sure that they're meeting all of their goals. Am I hitting this right? Okay. So to speak to the folks that we have reached since January 2022 and to December 2024, we have encountered 270 patients, and we've enrolled 131 of them. So essentially, they may or may not be a part of the program if they were outside of our eligibility criteria or if they decline their services. Most of the participants that have been enrolled are male, 95%, 85% of them are African American, and 91% of them are injured by firearm. Most of the participants that have enrolled fall within the ages of 16 and 18, so we really are focused on our youth. All right, and then in terms of the participants' location, we are one of the only level 1 trauma centers in the region, so we actually serve more folks outside of our original goal, which is Greater Charlotte. So we oftentimes encounter patients that are coming from South Carolina as well. So these are some of the counties that we have been supporting outside of Mecklenburg. Nonetheless, 63% of the enrolled patients reside in Mecklenburg County, representing 19 zip codes, and these are the zip codes that we are finding most frequently. So to support optimum healing, each Project Boost participant identifies program goals to accomplish during their enrollment. So Brittany and her team have been able to identify over 162 goals with our participants. Most of them need support with employment, with educational opportunities, and mental health services. Now, we are tracking our participants' progress at the 90-day and 180-day mark. And so what we have found is that those at the 90-day mark that were eligible, that we were able to contact, many of them are actually making progress towards meeting their goals. So over 69%, or close to 69% have. Also, as Brittany mentioned, we are aiming to address their social drivers of health needs. So each of them is screened at bedside, and referrals are made based on their needs as well as the goals that were previously met. And what we found is that most of them need support with housing, safety, obviously, and transportation. What we have found, again, at the 90-day mark, those that screen positive for SDOH needs, we found that over 90% of them were able to get support for those needs. All right, and I just wanted to speak briefly to the recidivism rate as well. So what we found is that we have less than 12% of our folks coming back to the hospital after they are injured, so that's fantastic. And we're also finding that 83% of our participants are not interacting with the justice system after enrollment, meaning they have no pending cases or arrests. So the program is working, and we have plenty more accomplishments that Brittany is going to speak to.
Thank you, Morgan. So we are still a fairly new program, just under 3 years that we've been seeing patients, but we are very proud of what we've done thus far. The biggest thing I'm focusing on is expanding our community resources. There are a lot of needs for our patients, and we never want to extend any of our community organizations too much. We know there's a capacity for that. So I've been able to access over 50 new community-based organizations in the community to add them to our referral system, just to ensure that anyone that's able to support in the community, we can be a part of them. And also we're looking to expand and show what these organizations are doing for them to get the light they need and hopefully the funding that they need to support additional patients as we see them. We're also looking to submit a manuscript for our program. We were the first violence intervention program in the state of North Carolina, and we want to share that information nationally, how we began, what we did, our highs and lows, and hopefully support those that are looking to start violence intervention programs in other cities. This picture located here is from the first annual Violence Prevention Conference in Raleigh. It was the first statewide conference, and we were able to present the work that we've done thus far on the stage, and we are very, very proud of it. We're hoping to share as much as we can as we continue to grow. I wanted to share briefly one quick story. This is probably one of our favorites. This is a young man that came into our hospital system, Jadavian, at the age of 17. He was shot just a week before he was scheduled to go off to college. He had a football scholarship, and he actually lost that scholarship due to his injury. He wasn't able to go immediately to college. He worked with our intervention specialist, Derek, there, who worked with him diligently. He was able to help him find funding. He was still able to attend Winston-Salem University without funds that he would have to come out of, and he was also able to walk on to the football team after a year of healing. So we love to tell that story as much as possible. What I don't mention a lot is Jadavian's friend that was with him during the shooting drove him to the hospital, and we were able to do a bit of a preventative intervention with him as well to talk about the situation. So it really is holistic all-around care that we're looking to cover for these folks. So anyone that comes into the hospital, we want to make sure we touch point that anyone that is supporting them. So as we look ahead for our program, we have lots of goals that we want to achieve. First, we'd like to hire a credible messenger, meaning someone who could be a peer support for our individual patients. As mentioned, we are focusing on youth violence currently. We are hoping to expand that as we grow and get more staff. But we would love a peer support who has lived experience, who could help support our patients in a way that we're just not, possibly able to identify with them. We know that trust comes from when they see someone that they know and feel. So we have to be honest with what we can do and what we can't do. So we are hoping to get a peer support specialist in there very soon. Morgan is going to lead some focus groups for us very, very soon. We have a lot of patients that have gone through the program thus far who have been with us a year or more, and we want to hear about their experiences, good and bad, so that we can grow our program and see how we can be better, and also hear about the good things we've done thus far. We are also looking to expand our community resource hub. As mentioned, we are hoping that all of our referrals go through our hub, through the online services. There are a lot of ways to track that data, and we want to make sure any organizations we are referring to on a regular basis are identified and shared with the public to hopefully support their growth as well. We're also looking to build an external committee, and that's when I look at you all and smile in the crowd. I know we do a lot of work within the hospital, but there are a lot of constituents outside of the hospital that can help to support us. So I'm looking to have a committee to show some support, give us feedback, and hopefully give us some advice on how we can grow and expand. That is all we have, so I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Stewart and talk about ATV. Thank you all.
Amazing. That's the real change.
So, Mayor and members of council, I believe this is Dr. Stewart's first presentation in front of you. I know she's been at the committee level, and I'm surprised that Rebecca Hefner didn't have walk-up music for you, but but I'm sure you'll rock it, okay?
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Dr. Rakesha Stewart. I am the Deputy Director for Housing and Neighborhood Services. And I just want to give a big thank you to Dr. Washington and to Brittany and Dr. Maxwell. It has been a privilege to work with them as partners as we work through Alternative to Violence. So as I move forward, I want to remind you that at the top of the presentation, Sean talked about the framework for violence prevention. He talked about some building blocks. So the building block we just heard about was the hospital. So I'm going to talk to you about the community-based efforts. So I want to do a quick overview just to remind you kind of where we started and where we are. So Alternative to Violence, which we refer to as ATV, is a community-based violence interruption program. It's evidence-based, and we use the CVG model. CVG stands for Cure Violence. Started in 2021 with one site that was in Betty's Ford area. And then in 2023, we were able to expand to the West Boulevard area and then also over to the Nations Ford Arrowwood. Our primary focus has been to mediate retaliatory violence between youth ages 14 to 25. So our program is operated by YAP, also known as Youth Advocate Program. They run our Betty's Ford site and our West Boulevard site. Urban League of Central Carolinas runs our Nations Ford Arrowwood site. These sites are being funded by City of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, Wells Fargo, Greenlight Fund, and other federal grants. A part of the model is that the organizations, they do work with Greenlight Fund to make sure they're able to work on their sustainability plan so that the work can be sustained. So giving you a little information about the model that we use by Cure Violence, there are 3 strategies that are very important, and without them, it would not be successful. So we're talking about focusing on interrupting conflicts, supporting high-risk individuals, and changing those harmful social norms. We're looking at being community-centered. So our ATV members are trusted community messengers. I think we just heard that from Brittany. It is very important that they are credible messengers. So a part of the model is we use ATV hires employees that have lived experience. This way they can relate to, and they can have conversations that you and I can't have, and they can get through to individuals. So you want me to say it again? Okay. And then there's the comprehensive support, which is outreach workers engaging high-risk individuals. And just like the hospital does, they connect them with resources as much as possible, whether it be housing, employment, or health support. And trust me, they do the connection because my phone rings. It doesn't matter what time of night it is. If they need assistance, I'm going to answer, and we'll do the best to provide whatever resources that the city has available. So when we think about the Cure Violence model, you may recall in 2020, Council had an opportunity to review programs, and a part of your commitment was the use of data and evidence. So we chose to go with cure violence. You also may recall towards the end of last year, there was an action set before you to accept a financial contribution from Mecklenburg County. So cure violence is not free. The training is very important to the work, and we thank Dr. Washington and Mecklenburg County for their donation. And council, I thank you for allowing us to accept that donation so that we can continue the training for this great work. So I want to share a few of the program activities and just give you a little bit more information. So we're looking at 76 community activities, 3,500 residents. I'm not going to read all the numbers, but I want to give you some specific information. So lots of work being done in the community, and a few examples of community activities are back to school events. They're ensuring that the youth are prepared to go back to school. Resource fairs to make sure we're connecting them with resources. And one event that I really want to highlight was in the summer. So we know we want to make sure there are no idle minds. So in the summer, we had a midnight basketball game. We were there from about 10 p.m. till about 2, 3 a.m. And we had the support of city employees were there, county employees were there, and we were supported by deputies from Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office. All three sites have participants. Now, you know, sometimes when you bring people from different areas, there are some issues. We had not one. So it was a great event. I want to point out a little bit about the canvassing. Canvassing is basically just being out in the community where needed at all times. So it could be within an apartment complex. It may be in a school. I know that our Betty's Ford site has an agreement with West Charlotte, so they're at lunchtime every day to make sure that there are no issues. Another quick story. During a recent canvassing last week, there were 2 individuals who were prepared to create violence against each other. So because of the relationship that our ATV workers had, not only were they able to prevent the action from happening between those 2 individuals, they were able to go talk to their parents. And my understanding is they worked it out and they understood that is not the way to go. It is because of the relationships that they have, because they're credible messengers, that they were able to prevent that violent action from happening.
What they call the truce.
Yes, ma'am, a truce. So a little bit about our progress accomplishments. So year 1, you may have seen the evaluation, which was completed in 2023. We're expecting in 2025, within the next couple of months, to have our next evaluation. But I do want to just point out real quickly some of the accomplishments. So some of the strengths were the staff credibility, which I think you've heard all 3 of the presentations mention the importance of training, and then the strong partner engagement. Positive outcomes, we've seen a lot of changes with behaviors and reduced violence, and then early impact. So these were some of the accomplishments that we've seen, and the goal is that we're able to continue as we continue this program. So I want to share 2 short stories of impact. So the first one is about Marcus. He is one of the participants in the Nations Forward area. Names have been changed. He was known on the streets. Names have been changed? No, I changed. I'm not using his real name. Oh. I'm sorry.
You might want to just pick a different name altogether next time.
I promise you, Mr. Manager, this was not intentional.
The description does fit.
Oh, okay, so Marcus was known for his quick temper and involvement in disputes. So the program basically helped him to manage his anger, to understand there was a different way. So with his newfound self-control and communication skills, he was able to enhance his professional life. So he started working at a local restaurant and quickly rose through the ranks. So his manager was able to recognize him for leadership potential and promoted him to a manager position. So this was someone that just kind of hung out with the ATV people. Let me go with you to Canvas. I know the community, I know the people. Then eventually he took on a role because he really wanted to make a change. But what I appreciate is we help them make a change within themselves. And when you make a change within yourself, it's so much easier and more impactful to make a change with others. So with Marcus, we want to remind you that transformation is possible. The second story is Donnell Gardner, affectionately known as Dink. He is the program manager for YAP, for Youth Advocate Program. So he was recently named one of the great 28 Black Charlotteans that are shaping our city for 2025. In the Q City Metro article, Donnell shares that he was incarcerated for 13 years, but he committed to himself that when he was released that he was going to make a difference. So for more than a decade, he coached the Rise Athletics Association youth football. He started with us as a violence interrupter. He was later promoted to a supervisor. Now he runs both the Betty's Ford and West Boulevard site for YAP. And his quote is, "I put forth all my efforts to make a difference in the community, and that's just what I've been doing." So we are super proud of Donnell and the work that he's doing in those two corridors. So as I prepare to turn the presentation back over to Sean, I want to share with you, ATV is just one program operating as a part of a larger place-based approach to community safety. So I was looking at one of Dr. Washington's slides, and I like the word that he used. It said ecosystem. So we are a part. We're not the ecosystem, but we are a part of it. So you hear a lot of different things that are place-based of what we're doing within the city. So you hear a lot about corridors. So we have two ATV sites in the corridors. Last week, the corridor team actually had an intentional meeting, and all we did was discuss what each of the departments within the city that are working towards violence prevention, what are we doing? So we spent an hour and a half just sharing what we're doing to make sure that we know what resources are available as we continue to do this great work. You heard CMPD talk about community roll calls and enhanced foot patrols. In a presentation by Debbie and Rebecca a few weeks ago, they touched on quality of life, such as street lighting and youth engagement. So I just want to remind you as I prepare to take my seat that we are doing a great job with Alternative to Violence, but it does take a village. That's why I'm so appreciative of my partners here at the table, and we have to make sure that our goal is that we continue to work together.
Well said. Thank you, everybody. I think that's great. Lots of evidence of collaboration and integration and funding partnerships. You know, like I said, things that 5 years ago were really just ideas have now been activated and real things are happening. Good news, just 2 more slides. I'll be quick. And I think, Rakeesley, you already hit the punchline here, which is great. So just a couple of closing themes on the left here. Obviously, public safety is driven by community-wide efforts and collaboration. We cannot do this alone by any means. And then on the right, just a reminder back, you know, when we think about the existing priority areas and initiatives that Council just reaffirmed at your retreat, when you take that long-term lens, I think you can make a credible case that these priorities are helping to deliver public safety in the long term for the city of Charlotte. Access to affordable housing, access to mobility, access to workforce, good-paying jobs, and then all of the targeted investments in corridors of opportunities. Those things in the long haul have the potential to pay tremendous dividends for this community as it relates to public safety. So here is kind of the end of this journey this evening, and it's really kind of turning our attention towards the future. Now what? This 6-part series is ending tonight, and just to keep this real simple and straightforward, we want to propose 2 options here, option 1 and option 2, and I would call option 2 the staff recommendation. Option 1 would be, let's continue the momentum with these series. You can see the chevrons here. Here are 4 examples of the types of things that could be done as deep dives in future council conversations. You'll recall with the CMPD annual report issued in mid-January that there's an entire section focused on crime management, and there are specific strategies and tactics focused on violent crime that CMPD has in place. There could be conversations around that. Public safety and corridors, Rakisha mentioned, we talk about corridors a lot. We could do a deep dive around all of the cross-functional, cross-departmental work that's focused on public safety in various ways. Quality of life in Uptown, ongoing conversations, thinking back to last year, early last year on ordinance enforcement. There could be interesting things to chew on there. And then juvenile crime with the policy referral last year, just building on where we left off. So that would be one option. Second option, the recommendation here would be give us 45 days. Give us 45 days in a collaborative way, the city manager's office, CMPD, and the INT department to really dig into what we're referring to here as data analysis and insights. And if I could give just a real quick example of what do we mean when we say that. Think back, for those of you on the Housing Safety and Community Committee, to the juvenile crime referral. Early conversations, we were looking at more like the macro data. Like, oh my gosh, juvenile crime has gone up significantly from 2022 to 2023. There were over 3,000 juveniles arrested in calendar year 2023. It's a big number, it gets your attention. If you look at 2021 to 2023, an even bigger number, of course, over 7,000 juveniles were arrested, definitely gets your attention. But what do you do with that? How do you dig into the data in a way where you have actionable insights? And that's where CMPD and IT were quite helpful, because we shared an observation that if you looked at 38 juveniles in the community during that 3-year period, were responsible for over 800 arrests. So I'm not making news here today. These are things that were shared in the committee last year. And those kind of insights led us into really interesting conversations around inconsistencies on secure custody orders, which is more in the Division of Juvenile Justice and the courts space, but it's relevant nonetheless. Interesting conversations around juvenile detention center. Juvenile detention should always be the option of last resort. I'm not trying to resurrect this conversation, but where we left off in committee is a credible case can be made that if you're going to end up in a detention center, we're better off as a community having one in Mecklenburg County. That led into interesting conversations around what are we missing in this community? What else are we missing in this community? Behavioral health for juveniles rose to the top. We had really good conversations about the Katie Blessing Center. City and county came together to provide support. Oh, by the way, they're doing a groundbreaking a couple months out, transformative kind of an opportunity for this community. And then you'll also recall that CMPD introduced the JADE program in early 2024. Real strategies, CMPD officers doing approximately 200 home visits focused on kind of monitoring at-risk juveniles and intentionally, proactively reaching out to those individuals, literally showing up at their home in hopes of preventing further instances of violence. So I use all of that just to illustrate, if we can really dig into the data, it puts us in a better position to come back, not with the answers really, but an opportunity to share with you, hey, here are some things that you could consider from a policy perspective, or even from a reshaping of investments with existing resources. Or maybe there are some examples of different strategies or tactics that could be meaningful. So that's an approach, and I know there's a tremendous sense of urgency on this. I wouldn't want to leave anyone on council or the community under the impression that if we were to be granted this 45 days to do this work, that in any way means we're pressing pause as an organization. Rebecca Hefner and team are leaning into community engagement work and neighbors building neighborhoods every day and every opportunity they get. The chief's annual report made a great reference to the Core 13 initiative that was just launched in the fourth quarter of 2024, specific things that CMPD is doing to elevate their presence in areas that are experiencing the most victimization. So all of that work continues every day. We're just asking for 45 days to do something a little different that we hope is additive to what's already in place. So that's kind of the extent of where we wanted to just paint a picture of a couple options, but then we're going to need to get some feedback from you on next steps. So with that, I will pause and ask for some help on how we want to do this.
Mr. Jones?
So thank you, Mayor and members of council. Great job, Sean. One of the things I would like to point out tonight that everybody who's made a presentation to you over the last few months. We're actually here tonight from the staff perspective because it is a combined effort. And again, I appreciate our partners being here. The other thing I'll say to Sean's 45-day proposal, I typically don't bet against this guy, and he called me Sunday and said, do you mind if I pitch this? It started off at 60, so I guess there may be some pressure on you to make it faster. And I just have full faith and confidence in the team, and I would like for you to consider the opportunity for us to just get into this data and dive a bit deeper. But that was it. It's a great job to everybody.
So I want to say thank you to Dr. Reynard, our friends from Atrium, and our friends from, I guess I can't say Ms. Stewart's friend, the people that make the city work. I want to say thank you. I am sure that there's a lot of conversation and thoughtfulness to be in this moment, but we just have to think about 3 years ago, we were talking about, how to do something in a hospital, and Atrium stepped up. So thank you. And this team has done a terrific job thinking about what else we can do to make our city safer. And so to the chief and everybody else, it's been an absolutely marvelous experience to learn more, because I think we all know that we need to learn more about what's going on in our city and also what's going on with our youth especially. So with that, I know that we have a number of people that want to speak, and I was going to go ahead and start with Mr. Graham and move around, and then we'll come down this way, okay? Mr. Graham?
Thank you. So first let me say that I really appreciate, Mr. Manager, the 60 days probably that we've spent reviewing and establishing a baseline for the council to consider. I did do my homework over the weekend. I went back and looked at the Safe Charlotte reports, volume 1 and 2. Public safety as a public health crisis tonight, the public safety framework, the public safety update, reviewed the 2024 annual report from CMPD. And so I thank you for providing me and the council a baseline of information to jump from. I want to thank all the presenters tonight for the work that they have done throughout those last 60 days, giving us this information. I think it's really, really helpful. Data is important, and I respect data, and I think we ought to use data to make informed public policy decisions. I also want to thank the chief and his leadership team that's here tonight. I understand the work that you guys do is real hard. I really want to thank even the uniform officers specifically, because I have more interaction with them on a day-to-day basis for the work that they do, the men and women on the street. Despite our best efforts, though, in the eyes of the public, we still are falling short. I'm not sure we have 45 days. The public, while the information was good tonight, I'm sure that will not lead to news tonight. What led to news over the weekend was yet another shooting in uptown Charlotte. A young lady was gunned down at the El Scalabro Resource Center in broad daylight. 2 guys got in a gunfight. One now is dead. The other is probably in jail, which means that we got a gun problem in Charlotte, and that we got to solve quickly. Just in meetings today, I was with CMPD and with Rebecca Hefner and talking about the park at Oakline and some of the issues that we're having over there with the property owned by Levidian, formerly the Housing Authority. I had a meeting this afternoon with Charlotte City Partners talking about other issues, but came down to public safety yet again in uptown Charlotte. And I had a meeting over the weekend on the Batesville Road corridor and follow up that meeting today. And the issue was open-air weed sales, loitering, public intoxication, et cetera. And just as I'm sitting here, I got a text from a constituent who probably was not aware that we're having this meeting tonight on this issue, and we need cameras, we need lighting, we need enforcement. There's 3 properties on the corridor, one next to your police station on Beatty'sford Road, where she reports that there are open-air drug sales, and on a property that's actually owned by the city on the corridor. The Speaker of the House is coming this weekend, and on the 24th, and the President Pro Tem, and certainly mobility is going to be an issue that we should talk about for sure. But if we don't talk about the lack of funding for our judicial system and our court system in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, we're missing the point. If we don't talk about the fact that there's legislation that want to do away with a permit for open carrying in North Carolina, then we're missing the point, right? Because I'm not sure more guns on the street makes us more safe. It just means more guns in the wrong hands, more guns in cars that are being broken into, more guns on the street, more shootings in Charlotte. So I understand where we are, but I would hope that there's a parallel track, Sean, that we are using this 45 days to scrunch the data, and I think we can do more than one thing at a time. But I think we need to really have a specific plan of action on a wide variety of issues, because no doubt about it, the work is being done. There's no doubt about that. CMPD is doing their job. The city and the county, their collaboration, while quietly as it's kept, it's working, I guess. Right? I think we need to raise the visibility of it so people can know what we're doing. I'm not sure they do, despite our best efforts. I just think that we just really have to focus, crunch the data, and come with some really, really strong solutions, because we're losing confidence with the people that we represent. And these are not my words. These are words that I've gotten from some of my constituents. No tolerance. I mean, enforce the laws that are already on the books. Again, focus on these convenience stores that's selling fortified liquor, beer, and wine. Focus on the laundering issue on these corridors. Work with Mecklenburg County to ensure that these parks are safe and secure, and it's my understanding that there'll be 24/7 park patrol starting July 1st provided by the county for parks in uptown. But that doesn't do anything with the parks along the corridor, especially Catherine Simmons, where you need gloves and strong boots to walk through the park, because there's needles and syringes and everything ungodly happening behind there. We got stores that we know that there are illegal activities happening there, and people are doing things behind the stores that we passed ordinance about 2 or 3 months ago that needs to be enforced. And while homelessness is not a crime issue, the homeless and unsheltered are generally victims of crime. There is a perception that somehow that's a part of the problem, which it is not. We need to provide a better focus, collaboration with the county in reference to how do we run people to services. And so all of this is happening, so I'm not sure what happens in 45 days, Sean, in terms of how you guys crunch the numbers, crunch the data, and the report is 30 days old now, so hopefully that someone's already started crunching it, and there are a lot of recommendations that the chief has already outlined. So somehow I hope that we can move quickly, and 45 days may be quick for government. Mm-hmm. It's not quick for the people that we represent. People are really, really asking for a response from this council in reference to how are we dealing with whether it's perception that there's a problem. The reality is what I just mentioned, those things happened this weekend. And that's the reality that people are seeing every night on our nightly news, are comforting friends and our family members who are victims of some of this violence, are being scared, like the phone call was on today, where bullets are coming through people's home at night. They wake up in the morning, they see bullets in their cars, and people are afraid, and rightly so. And so, Mr. Manager, I hope and that we could move quickly, and again, 45 days may be quick. I'm not sure. From my perspective, it is not, because I think we could have been working on parallel track going back to the first presentation in November in terms of what's the course of action that this council will take to demonstrate in a very vocal, visible way that we acknowledge the problem and we're taking proactive steps to solve it. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Driggs.
So I agree with Mr. Graham, and instead of repeating what he said, I'll just incorporate his remarks by reference to mine. The thing that I feel is the important issue is we are sort of dodging a question, and I've said this in the meeting before. There are some difficult choices you can make about enforcement in particular, and then there are questions that come up about whether we are invading, discriminating, doing those things. And so I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, but I will note that we've heard a lot of it. We were talking about data-driven solutions years ago. We were supposed to be seeing the results of alternative to violence a long time ago. So I think we should continue every effort to try to intervene and not let it get to that point. But at the end of the day, that has to be supported by stronger enforcement. And with that, we are, the difficulty of our position also is we don't control the courts and the district attorney. And therefore, we are looking at what can we do when we have this problem with the courts and the district attorney, and we are trying to maintain a balance in terms of the engagement. And I think, Chief Robinson, you took exception or questioned my use of the word aggressive. And I use the word intentionally because what I mean is I don't think there is a completely painless way to tackle this. I think if we do something effective to tackle this, there are going to be people who are upset. I don't see a way around it. And so we can tippy-toe around it, and we can come up with all kinds of programs. But if we don't have the ability to take a certain core of repeat offenders out of circulation, then we are helpless. So I'm grateful for every instance of successful intervention, every life that can be saved. But I'm not seeing in the data, and I'm certainly not hearing from people that talk to me who tend to be more uptown business people, I guess, than constituents. But I'm not hearing that they are encouraged by what they've been seeing. And so I don't know the answer yet. I'm not concerned about the 45 days. I think you should go and do that. But I don't think we should assume that in 45 days something is going to happen that's going to make a huge difference. We need to take this seriously now. And fine, I'll look at the data when it comes along. But this isn't something that we should appear to just sort of put on hold for 45 days. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Bakari?
Yeah. I agree with a lot of that. I think the only nuance I put into this is I think this is a good idea, and I think the outcomes will either be as good or bad / status quo as how this 45 days and this go-forward plan are focused. We've spent, the last 2 months going through this series of different things. Great, applaud all of that. But whether it's that period of time or the 8 years before that, we've had the same conversation over and over and over again. And the problem isn't our intent, it's the takeaways, and all the takeaways are almost always anecdotal. We have some anecdotes of this program is doing this, or this person had a great experience afterwards, all very important. but that doesn't get us to scalable outcomes, which is what we need right now. So I would say that whether it's this last series over the 2 months, whether it's the reports and the nice bound things we get, two statements can be true at the same time. A lot of people are doing a lot of good work, and violent crime is at unacceptable levels. Property crime is at unacceptable levels. And the problem is, it feels like when I'm talking in conversations around here, it's either one or the other. And I think we have to get to a point where both are okay statements for us to accept, and that latter one, that these are just unacceptable levels that we're experiencing right now, actually needs the data analysis to arm us for our big takeaway. What policy changes or changes in budget are we actually going to make? So, I personally believe, I've said it multiple times, so this is where I think council comes into play in this 45-day period. It's not like we'll see in 45 days. We've got to provide direction and inputs into this. What I've stood firm in a hypothesis I have that I have searched everywhere for the data to be able to get my hands on, and I can't do it yet, which is a smaller number of repeat criminals are responsible for an outsized portion of the property and violent crimes that happen in our city. And that meets the trends and themes you heard before of the criminal justice system is broken, they're falling between the cracks. How can the data, one, confirm that I'm correct about that statement, which, again, we can't get to that when we're being presented things that are a view of, look at how much great work is happening. And we're not disputing that. We're saying this is not a perception issue. To Mr. Graham's point, the comments he and all of us get are not perception. They're people that said this happened, right? So we got to get into that data, see that that is indeed the case, and then have policy, procedure, real meaty conversations here where we get to those parts that are a little uncomfortable, where my idea is simple. This isn't the right term for it, but I think we need to have a Charlotte's Most Wanted list. Now, that wanted list doesn't mean we're going out and searching for these folks and trying to find them and invade their privacy. But when they hit the system the next time because they have 30 or 40 offenses and they got sent right back home, all of a sudden the jail, the DA, the courts, everybody is now, it's on their radar to say, let's pay closer attention to this. Because that person probably wouldn't commit another 30 violations over the next 12 months. And that's meaningful change, I believe, in the measurements and what we can do. So I think it's got to be data focused. It's going to be either based on battling the problem of perception that's out there, which I think is the wrong answer, or battling the actual reality that we are at untenable levels of property crime and of violent crime, and that we're going to quickly move to policy movements on those things that can actually change the measurable outcome in the short term. So I think I've heard that we're going to take a data-based approach before. I don't think a lot more than anecdotal stuff came out of that. I have hope that this is different, that this approach, based on some of the things he outlined there and the fact that, Sean has a track record of delivering on what he's doing, that we can make this one different. But I think it depends largely on what happens there and our involvement inside that 45-day period. So we get brought something that's directionally correct. But I think the punchline needs to be, we're not trying to change hearts and minds and perception. We're trying to change actual stats and trends and themes in the data that are moving these numbers that impact so many people's lives.
Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to start out by thanking Dr. Washington, Maxwell Brown, and of course, Dr. Stewart. I obviously didn't see everything that my colleagues saw in this, and although I agree with some of the comments, we have had this conversation for many years, but what I saw in tonight's presentation is highlighting the data that we have been asking for. I also, for me, think there's a different conversation that we need to have, Mr. Manager, and for my colleagues. As the city continues to grow, as the city continues to become very inexpensive for a lot of people, housing, food, transportation, access, we are going to see challenges. But we also got to have a conversation within our households, because it's our cousins, our children, our friends of friends that we know that are out there having access to certain things because that is what they have in their household. We, as a body, have control over our manager who has control over CMPD. Once that individual is arrested, they go to the courts. So we have individuals that are back out on the streets before the paperwork is done. At the same time, while we're sending a limited number, because we now have 2,400 officers, that's not even 23?
19.
Okay, 1,900 officers in a city, county that's over 1 million individuals. So the work that you all are doing, of which I think in their own way, my colleagues may have said it, but I'm saying thank you because the work that you're doing is not going unnoticed. But we also have to have a real conversation of all the other obstacles that's in the way, because we cannot pluck that individual and put them on punishment and say, you're going to stay here. We have individuals that go out and commit a crime even when they have an ankle monitor on. That's a different conversation that's happening at home. Now, we have a lot of challenges, but we also say it takes a village. Let's be honest. Our village has been scattered for more than a decade, for a number. But the work that I see, you're tracking. We know those 38. But we can't make our magistrate and our judges do something different than what they're doing. We can if we collectively took our butts out and actually voted consistently, but that's a completely different conversation. But what our chief did do is go with our DA to the North Carolina General Assembly and let it be known. I fuss about the chief every day, all day, any chance I get, because I'm always saying I'm gonna need you to do more. But what I don't want anyone walking away with in this conversation is this idea that we don't see what our Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department is doing and what y'all are doing with 1,900 people. If we had 5,000 officers, that would be not enough to keep you on every corner. Even what we have on the corner of Oakline, they don't even live there. You don't even live in my neighborhood, so I can't go to your mama door and say, what's this knucklehead doing? You driving down the street having a dispute with someone and just start shooting because you don't know how to use your words. And you don't have emotional intelligence. What I saw in this presentation is the fact that y'all are actually teaching people something that you thought they would already know, but they don't. So that is why I'm starting off with saying thank you for the work that y'all are doing. The expectation is not for you to do everything. This is an all hands on deck, but I want us to have a real conversation about what the expectation is. There are parents around this table. I am not one of them. I don't have no children. I don't have no pets either. Yet, it is our responsibility to try to figure out how we can help. So as long as we have groups out here trying to do the work and that are teaching adults how to have better communication with their children, and teaching their children how to better communicate their emotions and know that a gun is not the answer. You gave us a great example of an individual who was getting ready to have a discussion using violence. That y'all figured out how to, because of relationship building, because that's what it's all about. We walking around in pain, and we don't know how to acknowledge, and we don't know what to do with that pain. So then it escapes the way that it escapes. But I need us to understand that we got something that we can do. I don't know, Mr. Heath, if the additional 45 days is going to help, but what I'm interested in is learning policy-wise, what is the recommendation for city council for what we can do to help? Okay, we have grants out there for some of our partners. We have neighborhood matching grants. Okay, security cameras. Okay, now this business, are you going to allow our CMPD to have access to those cameras so we have immediate on-the-spot interaction? Or are you going to put up the signs that we've asked you to put up to say no solicitation? And are you going to stay in communication? Because there's some things that we have been trying at neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood since I was here the first time in 2011 to 2019. We need commitment. But for this tonight, I'm seeing progress in what we're doing. Yes, we want more. But we also got to recognize we're growing. People are hurting. They don't know how to express that hurt. Yes, we keep seeing on the news and receiving calls. Hell, in my own neighborhood, I look on next door. Did y'all hear that boom? Did you hear that shot? The answer is collectively, we have to figure out what we can do. But only thing Charlotte City Council can do is to continue to support the work that's happening. Figure out in a budget whether or not we can afford to identify quality officers. But I think we're going to also see a difference with the community officers, for lack of a better word, that are going to be out there, and we can do more with helping with sending out our violence interrupter partners to some of these situations because they have the relationship to de-escalate it before it gets to the next level. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, Ms. Watlington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with a lot of the sentiments of my vice chair here. Thank you for your work. And thank you for the work that you all are doing. You all continue to be tremendous. You're the tip of the spear. We can sit here and talk about how much more needs to be done and how we're getting text messages and this or that. That's always going to be the case. But the answer comes back to the very things that we've seen in this presentation, right? And so I would encourage each and every one of us, when we get these text messages, or we get people saying, I saw XYZ.
Come to the table.
Hello, that part. So tell them to come to the table, because that's what it's going to take. The work that I see here is scalable. The work I see here is database. The work I see here, yes, the work I see here is about prevention. And you're not going to see that data. What we should be asking ourselves is, what would those numbers look like if they weren't doing the work that they're doing? And how do we grow the work so that we can continue to see the gains? I do think that we've seen the data that confirms what you said, Mr. Bakari, about an a disproportionate amount of crimes being committed by a certain number of folks. We know that. Guess what? Our community officers and our beat officers, our patrol officers know who those people are. And those are the people that can connect with ATV resources, who can connect with those that are working on this. That's already happening. What we need to do is continue to support the work so that it can grow. We're doing the right things, and I just want to continue to stress that, because we can sit here and talk platitudes all day long. The work's not sexy. We're not going to see it every day at the top of the headlines. The average person watching the news at night's not going to see it, but we can see right here with what they've just presented to us that the work goes on, and it's impactful to the people that they're touching. What did you say the recidivism rate was on your programs? 80-something%, correct? It was north of 80%? Yeah. Go ahead.
So we're seeing 12% of those folks who are coming back into the program, who were in the program, coming back to the hospital. So it's over 80% of the folks are not coming back after they're enrolled.
And I'll do you one better. That's almost 90%. These are the people. I think about who else needs to be involved. What can we do? And I know some of this will be a part of the analysis, which I do not support more data analysis. You got that. Said never, ever by me. I absolutely support the 45 days because we've got to continue to do the work. It has to happen, right? So here for that, I need to understand what that means to us. Mr. Heath, resource-wise, time-wise, are you asking the manager to get something else off your plate so you can prioritize it? What do you mean when you say you need 45 days?
I'm just saying that across the city manager's office, INT, and CMPD, I think we've already had some preliminary conversations to be sure that we're ready to move immediately if that's the direction council wants to go. So we don't need to add resources to the mix. We just need to prioritize our work.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'm absolutely supportive of that. So I look forward to that. The question that I would ask is, who else? Who else needs to come to the table? I see all of the logos here of CMPD, Mecklenburg County, Atrium Health. Besides the people in the text messages, the private citizens, the neighbors, matter of fact, our neighborhood, and it's real, because that's who it's going to take. There's no heroes coming in to save our community. We are the community, and we got to do the work. And so, as I think about our neighborhood organization leaders, as I think about even our faith community, our coaches, so many of our football, our basketball coaches are interacting with some of these youth every day, right? They've got influence. So I'd love to see what some more of those connections with CMS would look like. And then the final question that I would leave to you all, and definitely would like you to weigh in. What I'm hearing from my colleagues is they're asking for answers. What do we tell our constituents? if a constituent came to you and said, what can I do? How do we change this? How can I help? What's the first thing that you would ask for to help support your work?
From a hospital standpoint, I think we need 24-hour coverage. There are a lot of patients that are coming into the hospital and leaving before we get a chance to even see them. And we know that they are at a higher risk of coming back, and they're also at a higher risk of committing crimes. And we're not able to touch point with them because there's 1.5 of us right now. So 24-hour coverage is going to be big for us. We also want to step into preventative measures. So we need more staff who can see folks that are maybe in the hospital that aren't violently injured, but they're proving to be risks for violence in their community. So we need more hands on deck.
My short answer to that, if someone asked me what could they do, I would say do something. I think you guys are right in that there is no simple answer. It's not just law enforcement. It's not just the interventional work that's happening, but it really is a community effort to be able to create safe spaces for folks. And there is something for everybody to do to help in that equation, depending on a person's perspective and what they're doing. That answer might change a lot. And I do want to just be clear that, it is, all of this must happen. It is not, in cities across this country that have seen progress in violence reduction, which we are seeing, I know that there are still too many lives. Any life lost is a problem. So I'm not in any way trying to minimize that reality for folks. And it is real. And it's not new in Charlotte. And it is certainly something that happens in communities across the country, unfortunately, and we don't want to happen. But in cities that have seen progress, they invest in both sides of this equation, both in terms of the work that we talked about tonight on the preventive side and interventional side, and also on law enforcement. And law enforcement, when I say it, is not just CMPD. That reflects the court system, that reflects the district attorney, and I didn't call them out earlier, the sheriff, but they all participate in the core group. But it is all of them, and also recognizing to, I think, Councilman Bakari's point earlier, there are policy issues that are at play here. And so from my perspective, if I'm talking to you guys, there is a policy agenda that could be shaped around both the issue we have with guns, as well as the issue we have with the courts and other issues. And so I do think if it were me, we are working very hard collectively, county, city, and staff agencies, and I know our partners in the chief are working really hard in CMPD with what they have, but there are also some policies that remain to be barriers to the forward progress that folks are trying to make.
So for me, I would say we need to know what is needed. So it goes back to what you said about bringing them to the table. So I'm grateful that the mayor put out the policy referral, because we were able to survey about 300 youth, as you all know, you're part of your committee, to find out what they need. So we heard about mental health, we heard about social norms, we talked about mentoring, but we need to bring youth to the table so that we can know what they need and not us assuming that we're going to put together this big program and it's going to meet their needs. So we want to make sure that we are truly being intentional about what we address. And we want to make sure that we're getting everybody. So for example, my youth programs team, we're out at Turning Point. We're out at the relatives with the unsheltered youth. So we need to make sure that not are we only bringing people to the table, but we're bringing everybody to the table so that we can hear the needs.
I just wanted to reiterate Brittany's point. My team and I are completing a gap analysis for the year, but at the mid-year point, we found that 149 patients met our criteria, and we missed 104 of them because they were coming in outside of the normal business hours. They were coming in on weekends when we don't have any staff. So just to reiterate, more support for the program could allow us to reach more patients.
Thank you so much. That's all.
All right. Ms. Brown?
Now, you know you should have came to me first because I'm an expert, but I'll let you slide today. By the time it gets to me, everybody said everything I need to say. But I will go back to my Housing Safety Committee and Community Committee with our Vice Chair and our Chair. Great job. What you said, I get that when people say they're not safe in our city, they're not safe. That's understood. We hear that loud and clear. But I also, when I get a text message or when I get an email and they say, what are you doing about the people putting a tent up in Still Creek? What are you doing about the crime that's on West Boulevard? I asked him, I got a seat at my table for you, because it's going to take all hands on deck, and I mean that with everything inside of me. It is a cultural issue. It is an issue where CMPD cannot fix alone. They will not be able to fix alone. The shooting that happened on Freedom Drive, a very close friend of my family. Wonder why? Because I've been living in this community for a very long time. I've been incarcerated a number of times, over and over and over again. It's no secret that I dated somebody that was heavily involved in narcotics. So the generational curses are out there. So I understand what goes on. I knew the young men that was at the gas station. You know, they were friends, and then they shot at each other, and one of them died. That was a bad decision that they made that night. And to the family members, my heart goes out to both. The one that died, Desmond, I know his mom very well. She's a Christian lady. So it does not happen inside of their home. Going back to Catherine Simmons, there's an organization called Safeguard, Atone, Validate, Educate. I work with Mr. Dean. That center is open 24 hours a day. Been able to take 100 people, and I've walked in this is the work that I do. I eat, sleep, and breathe this work outside of City Council. It was what I was doing before I came here. It's gonna be what I'm gonna be doing when I leave from here. So while I understand my colleagues saying that they're getting text messages, they don't feel safe, they've heard this story time and time again. Now let me come to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you, because at the end of this day, I am an expert. I am an expert in this line of work. Why? Because I have lived experience. I've lived this. I've walked this. I understand what it takes for people to change their lives. When I came home from incarceration, if you put somebody in front of me like Dr. Walton, I love her, but she's never been incarcerated. She has the education. She has the expertise to tell me what I need to do on the clinical side. But from a person that has lived experience, that have walked this line, that understands what it takes to turn your life around, and I've done that, and that's nobody in this room that cannot say I haven't. So although it takes a very, very long time, it does not if you put the right program in front of people. To me, the program is being put in front of the folks. So at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, when folks start to text us and say, hey, what are you doing? Ask them what are they doing? And then check their record and see if they vote. Because for me, I have 167,000 people in my district, so I've been told, don't quote me on that number, but it's more than I can handle. I'm one person. So when I get a text message, and Amanda can vouch for this, or an email that says, what are you doing? Ask them what are they doing? And do you vote? Because I'm not being rude, but I'm being truthful. Although I'm a city council person, for every constituent in this district and in this city, a lot of people don't vote. But they still want to have their problems heard loud. But what about the people that vote every day? We want to make sure that they're taken care of because they care about us. When we go back to the data, we asked for the data analysis. We asked to work with intergovernment organizations, the city and the county working together. We're doing that. So the way to move forward, the path to move forward, is to continue this approach that these expert folks have done back here, that they went and they've grabbed people with lived experience. They got people that understand what needs to happen. You take Mr. Donnell Gardner, who I work with out in the community very well. It takes a very special person to go stand on the 1500 block of West Boulevard, speak to those young men when you know they got guns in their pocket, when you know they got drugs in their pocket, but when they see you walk up, they respect you. Now, I'm not saying that I see it, but perception is real. I know what they're doing on the corner of 1500 block of West Boulevard because I grew up there. But you can't just have CMPD walking up to those guys. You got to have it has to be strategic if you want it to work, is what I'm saying. Recidivism is real. You talk about we can't afford to live here. There's no affordable housing. Hell, I can't afford to live where I live at. And I'm just being real. 110%. It is the God-having truth. And I work 3 jobs. Okay? This is a real story. At the end of the day, I work my fingers down to the bone, but I'm in this work. So I'm going to echo my colleagues because I know what it takes. The data is here. You asked for it. They showed you the data. They brought into Atrium Health. You can't ask for a better program model than this. Rome wasn't built overnight, and City Council problem to our solution to fix what we're going through is not going to happen overnight. It's just not going to happen. So we need to start somewhere, and it looks like we're moving in the right direction. 1,900 officers for a city with 1 million people where you can't buy no food, you can't get no groceries, there's no affordable housing, you got a circus at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I mean, I don't know what else you want to say. At the end of the day, when it's all said and done, we got to start somewhere, regardless as to who you voted for. That's how I feel, and I mean it. I'm grateful for the work that you're doing. I'm grateful that I'm grateful that you take the opportunity to involve people with lived experience, because the people that don't have lived experience, they simply do not get it. And until they get it, these numbers are going to continue to grow. They're going to continue to rise. And you can ask anybody that's been incarcerated, that's been shot, that's lost their kid. They want to see somebody in front of them that's been through what they've been through. I yield to my colleagues.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. I believe we would have Ms. Johnson next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Brown, for your passion. And to all of my colleagues, thank you to the panel for the work that you're doing. I sincerely appreciate it, and I'm honored to be a part of this work. When you see, you know, the slides and the work that we worked on since 2020, we see it coming to fruition, and we see progress. I agree that the number of officers for a city this size, you know, is just not enough. And I want to know, as far as the data and the crimes increasing, how is that on a percentage? The numbers might be higher than they were years ago, but so is the population. So can you answer that question? Is that an absolute increase, or where are we compared to the growth in the city?
I think if we could reshare in the initial presentation back in November when Chief Jennings spoke. He provided a lot of data going all the way back to 1990. And much of the data was scaled based on population growth. So you could see both changes in absolute numbers, but then changes in relative numbers. So I don't have any of those specifics here with me today, but we could be sure that you had that at your fingertips tomorrow.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would imagine much of it is because the city is growing. So we've heard a lot, and this is a public health crisis, and all hands need to be on deck right now. So what can City Council do for this? And City Council, we know that the city is growing. We know that many of our schools are overcrowded. Are we slowing down the growth? Are we looking at cumulative impact? Are we doing what we can do to really ensure that our students are getting quality education? As far as funding nonprofit organizations, we funded organizations in the 2025 budget, nonprofit organizations doing the work that still haven't received their money. That's something the City Council can do. You talk about cameras. This council won't even approve red light cameras that we know can impact safe streets. So what are we really willing to do, and not ask CMPD to do more or the courts to do more? What are we doing as a council? Are we looking at growth in infrastructure? Are we willing to say to organizations that we fund, ban the box so people can get a job? Are we willing to say to housing organizations that we give tax credit, ban the box so people with the biggest barriers can get stable housing? So there's opportunity for everyone on deck. Another thing that the city, there's a rule that we have that only 6 people can live in a home, when the county has a reentry program that allows people to live based on the square footage. That's a barrier. It's a code enforcement violation to have a group home for reentry if you have more than 6 people. We need to take a look at that. So we all need to be all hands on deck. We as council need to do what we do very, very, very well and continue to take a look at that. So I would say, are we willing to put more cameras in different places? Ensure that the nonprofit organizations that are doing the work are getting the funding, increase the funding for nonprofit organizations. And then I just have a question for Dr. Maxwell, or all of the panelists. So I'm a mental health provider. I have a peer support organization. And I know that individuals who have head injuries represent homelessness and criminal justice system at a overwhelming rate. Homelessness, it can be 50% of individuals who suffer homelessness have a history of head injury, and in the criminal justice system, some would say up to 60 to 87%. So in the hospital, you know that you're dealing with individuals who've suffered trauma. I ask, is questions regarding a history of head injury a part of your assessment? And even in the ATV program, if it's not in the assessment, I suggest that you include that. because then you have specific treatment. Atrium has a dynamite doctor, Dr. Chandler. He's amazing. And so make sure they're getting the correct treatment, because the cookie cutter approach does not work. So I would just ask that you be sure to include that. And also, if the individuals in your program, are they receiving behavioral health counseling?
I can answer that. So as far as head injuries, we work in conjunction with our Trauma Survivors Network organization. So they see all our trauma victims, so not just gunshots and stabbings. So they have a similar report that they do. We don't have one set up in our program specifically, but head injuries, PTSD, behavioral health is all screened when they are in the hospital. As we grow, we do want to have a mental health provider specifically within our program. So behavioral health services are not necessarily going to be mandatory, but we want to make sure every person that we see is screened for mental health services and behavioral health. It's a top priority for us as we continue to grow.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And the ATV program?
So for ATV, our workers are not medical, so they will provide the resource, but we don't make it, like she said, we don't make it mandatory, and they're not able to do a screening either.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate the trauma-focused approach. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you, Sean. I do have one other question. There's quality of life in Uptown. Is there a reason that we're focused on the quality of life in Uptown and not all areas? Like, there are areas that aren't in the corridors of opportunity or in Uptown. So tell me.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't read anything into that other than we just wanted to show a few examples of things that you're familiar with from previous conversations.
Okay. Well, thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's kind of odd to come last. There's been so much said. One next to last. Yeah. There's so much here. I guess I'll start with what my colleagues have started with. Thank you guys for the work, the emphasis that you've brought before this council. I do think it's comprehensive, and I do think it's a start. I don't see this as a net zero sum opportunity. Crime is something that we will forever have to mitigate. If you could figure out how to put CMPD and the Sheriff's Department out of business, then, you know, there's just no such thing, right? And so I'm not saying that that's an excuse for this, but I am saying that the continuation of data-driven, pursuits is something that we will forever be doing in a decision-making position. As stakeholders throughout the continuum, I know for sure, even the collection of this data, if I was talking from a quantitative perspective, if we were like what my colleague, for an example, Councilmember Mayfield said, which is an absolutely valid point, but if you think about it, in 2011, if someone was within the, statistical range of being a perpetuator of some of these crimes in 2011, they're now an adult. And based on the way that this data trends, that means that they would now be trended outside of where they would be in the range of committing certain crimes, right? So considering that people through time inevitably trend away from the data sets that we're trying to focus on, it actually implies that this is a continual effort. It's something that we'll continue to mitigate. I think we have to look at it as if we are adapting to the current climate, right? And the current climate says right now that, like everyone at this table has said, we have what is at minimum perceived to be a problem with crime that has increased since 2020, that is perpetuated by a certain demographic. Right here it's saying 81% are African American. They're between ages 18 to 34. And the emphasis it within the range of 18 to 44, it's tremendous, right? I'm encouraged by the fact that we have an intergovernmental assignment, because like everyone here has said, and I don't want to seem to repeat, I feel like that it takes a village. It takes all of us, and I don't feel like that there is an entity that can't take these statistics as seriously as everyone at the table does. And so I know, from a council perspective, we're looking at the what, right? You guys are set out to instruct the how, right? We're not here to instruct the how, but we have two immense possibilities at our disposal. We have policy implementation and we have budget. Those are the heaviest weights that the council can bring to bear in what will become your how. Sean, I believe in you, and I know how amazing you are as a leader. And so 45 days from you, I am excited about, because again, being frozen in time right now says that based on the data we have, the current issues, what do we intend to do to mitigate the risks that are before us right now? Right? We've had for a series of several weeks, stakeholders, our chief, his team, coming before us with specific data. And so, with that, what can we deploy as a council? I'm assuming that that's what those 45 days will instruct us on. And then you guys have added on what that how is. Who else do you feel like can be at the table? How can we be of assistance? We all have great relationships with our colleagues across leadership bodies where we can sit down and talk. I feel like that's also a missing opportunity for us to talk to our colleagues and our counterparts to say, hey, what are you thinking about? Hey, what are you talking to your colleagues about? Hey, what do you guys intend to deploy with the resources that you have at your disposal to make sure that even within what we have, a scope to define, that there are concurrent activities happening from a policy and budget perspective as well. So not to belabor any type of points, I think all of my colleagues have made very valid, very passionate points, very relevant points. Mr. Manager, I feel like 45 days I'm excited about. I would love to support. I'd love to see, and I don't know if there's any additional data that we could bring that would actually forecast anything different other than the fact that here is a freeze, a point in time with quantitative information on what we intend to impact. I can't let this microphone go, though, without saying that 28205 and 28215 belong to me.
Absolutely.
Right. And so with the emphasis on the crescent and having 81% of African American males impacted, that's not even a statistic that you hear out loud, right? So and you two have already been on the phone with me, right? So we've already had these conversations. The constituents that I represent don't understand that we've been having these conversations. But with emphasis on the impact that we need to make, particularly in East Charlotte, I'm, specifically interested in. I know that from a policy perspective, we anticipate deploying resources across 313 square miles of location, and that's a big lift, right? That's a heavy lift. But I feel like with intention, with quantitative information that can guide us specifically, I feel like we can do that, and we could do that responsibly. So I'm, like I said, particularly interested because two of these zip codes absolutely correspond with the human beings that vote for me, right? And based on some of this information at this table, which I won't belabor any points on or bore anybody with, but, there's a level of specificity that impacts me personally that I'm very interested in continuing the conversation around. And that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor. When you go last, you can reference everyone. Well, first, let me say this is a great collaboration with the city, the county, and Atrium. I often hear that we are not collaborating enough. So I think we all got to give a big hand to the collaboration here. This is what it takes to tackle issues, especially around homicides. It takes collaboration. So it's great to see this collaboration. Last, when we had this discussion, I had talked about the root causes.
And this presentation does that very well, because it talks about what is the root cause, because we know we can't arrest out of our ways to this problem to solve this. We got to get to the root cause, and this what we are doing, we need to do more of. So Councilmember Watlington and Mayfield and Brown and Johnson and Molina were all correct that we need to invest more into this program. We got to do more. We got to scale it. Now I hope that Albemarle Central will be one of the corridors where we can implement this, and other corridors throughout the city. What really caught my attention is when you gave zip codes and when you told the stories about participants, because I live into a 215 zip code. So this hits home. And some of these stories where we are, this is just one story out of many participants that you have served. What would it take to scale it at a very high, at a much bigger, so we can make much bigger impact, right? I hear 24/7 support, right? Right now it's 1.5%, but what would it take? And I think that's a question that I have for Sean and Mr. Jones and other. What can we do that is, that we can really look at this at the root cause and scale it at much higher level than where it is? Because this was supposed to be a pilot when we started 3 years ago. And now we got to do it at every corridor where we know there are areas that have been identified by the CMPD where it says here are where majority of our city's crime is happening, right? So let's scale it. So I did not mention 3 of my colleagues, Councilmember Graham, Driggs, and Bukhari. They brought up funding for our DA's office and our court system. And they're correct. This is going to take the entire village. So we have this on our legislative agenda, but I think we need to advocate for more funding with the business community's support. So just like we are doing with transit, we need to advocate it. We need to be more vocal. And we need to talk to our business community, like Keith Cockrell, Gene Woods, and others, to help us advocate for more funding for our DA's office and for our court system. Because, we can keep arresting the same folks 10, 20, 30 times, but if they keep getting out, we are not helping our CMPD officers. We are not helping our alternative to violence program. We are not helping the Atrium team that we have. So we got to also address the enforcement, but then also ensure that there are resources in place that DA's office has, the court system has, to help with the prosecution. Councilmember Johnson talked about funding that's been approved, hasn't gone out, and that concerns me because I had brought this several times to Mr. Jones and Mr. Heath's attention about digital inclusion fund that was supposed to go out a couple of years ago, that was approved for underserved communities, and still hasn't gone out because I get calls about it. I have gotten calls at least a couple of times. I would like to see a list of organizations that council have approved the funding for but has not gotten their funding. If you can get that list. And last but not the least, Councilmember Graham often brings this up. We got to make sure that laws are being enforced. So if Chief Jennings, if you can provide us a list of any laws that are not currently being enforced, because I'm not aware of any laws and ordinances that are not being enforced, but hey, you might surprise me. So I'd like to see that, because if it's not being enforced, why is it not being enforced? Is it the resource issue? What is it? So we need to get to the bottom of it, because it truly takes all of us, a village, to get to the bottom of this. That's all I have. Thank you.
Your mic, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Can you go back around one more time, Mayor?
No. No. I want to say thank you to the police officers.
mayor said not
that have
tonight.
listened here. I want to say thank you to all of you. So we, I believe, will be able to continue this discussion. And Jones, you have enough? Sean?
Yes, Mayor, and we have to go back to consent.
I know we have to go back to consent because we did the vote on these items that Ms. Johnson raised. So now we need to go to the consent agenda, which is,
Is that vote?
oh my God, this is like so many packets. So I know, thank you guys for what you're doing. Let's see, the consent agenda, Marie, is, oh, where is Marie?
Madam Mayor, I had,
Yes,
Numbers
Madam
that we
Mayor, I
have?
believe.
We've done.
you voted on 37,
37.
38, and 39. To defer, you voted on 34 that was pulled. The remainder of the consent item, though, needs to be approved.
Okay, so
So that would be a motion to adopt items 25 through 44,
I'm sorry, Marie.
excluding
Hey,
37,
guys,
38,
I need
39, and
I need-
34.
All right, I'm sorry, it was 20. Marie, can you say those?
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Oh, you're good, thank you. So that would be a motion to approve items 25 through 44, excluding items 37, 38, 39, and 34, which was already approved.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? Okay, that takes care of that agenda. Now, we start on item number 6 of our agenda that we have downstairs. And so,
Yes,
oh,
ma'am.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're going downstairs. We have a couple of public hearings. We got annexations and arts and culture. Arts and culture. All right, let's make it easy.
Are we on?
Meeting to order, and we'll start with introductions, and we'll start with our city clerk.
Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
Anthony Fox, interim city attorney.
Good evening, Tijuana Brown, serving City Council District 3. It's an honor and a pleasure to serve you wonderful folks.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, and I'm honored to represent District 4 on Bishop Johnson's birthday.
Your grandson.
Good evening, everyone. James Mitchell, City Council at Large.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
By Lyles, Mayor.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Robert Carter, 6.
Good evening, LaWanna Mayfield, Council Member at Large.
Good evening, Victoria Watlington, Councilmember at Large.
Good evening, Dimple Ajmera at large.
We begin our meeting with an invocation, which is an expression for us as we look at how we try to manage and be appropriate for the agenda that we have today. And so we're going to begin this, and we're going to ask Councilmember Johnson to give our invocation, and we'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance if you choose to stand. And so I'll turn it over to Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm honored again to give the prayer on Bishop Johnson's birthday.
Happy birthday, Bishop.
So, if we can bow our heads. Heavenly Father, Almighty Creator and source of all wisdom, we gather here today as servants of our community, entrusted with the responsibility to lead with integrity, inclusivity, fairness, and compassion. We ask for your guidance as we deliberate and make decisions that will impact the lives of those we represent. Grant us the wisdom to discern what is right, courage to stand for justice, and humility to listen with open hearts and minds. May our discussions be filled with respect and our actions reflect the values of service, unity, and progress. Bless this city and all who call it home. May we work together in harmony for the good of all, fostering peace, prosperity, and opportunity for all. In your name we pray. Amen.
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 All right? Okay, Deacon.
Girl, you went to church
I
Sunday.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right?
Well, the jury's still
All right,
out.
now
But we'll take it.
So we have, first item on our agenda, we don't have, Madam, do we have any speakers tonight? Thank you very much. So the first item on our agenda is item number 6. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on the Balcom area voluntary annexation?
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion I can't even get it out here, to approve, adopt the annexation ordinance with an effective date of February the 10th, 2025, and to extend our corporate limits to include this property. Is there anyone that,
I'd like to make a motion, Mayor, for A and B.
We have a motion for A and B. Do we have that already over here? But that's okay, okay. Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. All in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? All right, that passes. So the next item is public hearing on a decision on Park Crossing Phase 1 area voluntary annexation. Anyone signed up, Madam Clerk?
No, ma'am.
All right. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing and to adopt the annexation ordinance with an effective date of February 28, 25?
Move to close and adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? All right. No one is opposed. The next item is item number 8, it's a public hearing. Do we have anything on the River North area voluntary annexation? Madam Clerk, no one. So do I have a motion to close the public hearing and to adopt the annexation ordinance with an effective date of February 10th, 2025, and to extend the corporate limits to assign it to District 3?
Move to close and
Second.
adopt.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
We've got more people.
All right. Thank you. Anyone opposed? All right, the next item, we'll be moving into our policy agenda. Mr. Jones, do you have any additional policy for us?
No, Mayor, members of council, you have my 30-day memo. What I would like to just introduce, I guess, into the record, our newest Assistant City Manager, Allison Craig. She came to the city in 2018, and now she will be our Assistant City Manager with a portfolio that includes economic development, planning, water, as well as the Charlotte Development Center, and she's really going to have her hands in the corridors of opportunity. We have a little bit of an agreement that for a short period of time, she will also wear the hat of the acting economic development director. We're actually recruiting that position. And because of that, we have a ripple effect that Monica Holmes will be the interim planning director. And you may recall there's a process, there's an interlocal agreement with the county, so we have to go through certain steps in that process. But we're very happy that we have both Allison as an ACM and Monica Holmes, who was able to step into the interim planning director position. So I just wanted to announce that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations,
That's really good. Good news. All right, so the next item on our agenda is the Arts, Science, and Culture Council Governance Board discussion. This came out of the Jobs and Economic Development Committee, so I'm going to turn it over to the chair for his comments, and I believe that it is, we'll go with what you're doing in terms of your recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Jobs and Economic Development Committee received a referral to recommend what role the City Council should serve within the governance structure for arts and culture. After review and discussion, the committee voted 4-1 on September 3rd, 2024. So this is an item that has been with us for a while to advance the item to full council full consideration. And again, the explanation is in your package. It talks about the governance board, the membership, the structure, et cetera. And again, the Economic Development Committee voted 4-1 for approval. Thank you.
All right, do you have a motion?
Move to approve the Jobs and Economic Development Committee recommendation to participate in the new Arts and Science Culture governance structure.
We have a second. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Watlington?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Two things. The first thing is a point of clarification. I see here that it captured in the last bullet point at the December 2nd meeting that the committee voted unanimously to not recommend using hospitality funds for ongoing arts and culture support. I want to understand why that bullet point is a part of this background.
I'm sorry, the committee, I do know that the committee talked about the tourism funds, right? And made a recommendation or made a statement. I'm not sure it's anymore.
I'm just trying to understand this vote.
It's not part of the action, it's
Okay.
informational.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not.
The action is the bold at the top.
Thank you. And then the second thing is, as no surprise to anyone, I will not be supporting this motion, not because I don't support the arts, not because I don't think we need another way to organize our governance, but as has been mentioned, the 2 or 3 times we've seen this particular structure come ahead, I think we're getting too far away from the voters. And I have some concerns about what seems to be a do loop in terms of appointment structure and relationship between the recommending board and the actual board that does the awards. So I will be a no on this particular vote. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I want to piggyback off what Dr. Watlington said. I know that it's not a part of the recommendation, but it was a specific point of conversation. So I wanted to know, is this a response to that request? Does that mean this will no longer be discussed in committee? So I wanted to understand that also.
The committee voted 5-0, from my understanding, to not recommend using hospitality funds for ongoing arts and culture support.
So I'm torn on this one also. I know that the artists are waiting on our decision, but I, like Dr. Watlington, there doesn't seem to be any change from what's been presented previously. And I also, from just a practical and principled position, how we can say that, our arts and culture aren't a part of the economic development, or that this is a fund that we should just take our hands off. Meanwhile, taxpayers and, we're looking at sales tax and property tax and everything when there's this fund. It's just a challenge to me why we won't even discuss it. I know what the state legislators say, but as a council, I mean, it's hands off. So I just don't see, you all know how I feel. So this is a challenge for me. I do have a question as far as this group. Would this be a pilot? Would this be a pilot project, Mr. Manager? Would we look at this in a couple years to assess the success of it? How are we planning to determine the success of this council?
So it would not be a pilot, but again, each council every year has an opportunity during this budget development process to change things. But I don't believe that's the recommendation going in. So what do I mean by that? So if we start to think about it, it's about $21 million that is going into the ecosystem. Let's deal with just the city's portion, which is about $11 million. The county, about $10 million. A lot more than, I think, the $3.5 million when the city was at a low point in terms of its contributions to the arts and culture community. So let's talk about the $11 million on the city side. $9 million is what we've been saying over and over again is hardwired. So that decision will be made by this body today, tomorrow, the next day, the next day. $2 million of the $11 million would be for grants for some of those 30-plus organizations that aren't hardwired. And with that, there are opportunities for inclusion, opportunities for making sure that some of these hardwired organizations are making themselves available to partner with some of the others. I think what's also important is that $2 million in this process, to Dr. Watlington's point, would be determined by a board that you appoint. You appoint. Foundation for the Carolinas has appointments as well as the county. But even that board will have a grant-making body that looks at applications, but the grant-making body isn't the final approval. The final approval will always be the board in which you, the county, and the foundation appoint it. I think what's important, I'm going to go a little bit over to the $10 million from the county, but not too much, is that in this arrangement, $3 million of the county's money would be able to come over to those 30-some organizations that you're funding in the hardwired $9 million for educational purposes. So I will say, I had a call this morning that so your $9 million is out, the hardwired money. Some of the county money is out to like Culture Block, to some of the other organizations. And I think what has been the challenge is, and it's kind of tough, is to look at this as one bucket of money that is helping so many different areas, whether it's cultural grants to individual artists, small groups, neighborhood organizations, educational grants for mid to large groups, annual operating support for organizations in the county, venue assistance. There's a lot of things that are outside of the $9 million that we've hardwired. And so that's, I think, what makes it unique and something that's very different.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Manager Jones, just for clarification. Because I think where I feel there's the disconnect is who's really accountable for this governance. So normally we all, which we have tonight, a number of appointments to boards. We don't historically receive an update, honestly, from the boards that we appoint. Once we make the nominations. We don't really necessarily hear about what the board is doing. Previous history with arts and science, and some of us wanting more accountability as far as what is actually happening to ensure what we've encouraged, who has access to funding, actually happens. So in theory, because we have 5 votes, that's what gives us the ability to see the ASC's work. But in reality, one of the challenges is that our committees really don't come and report to council unless we do a very specific request. So I just want to clarify that what this recommendation tonight is saying, with our 5 appointees along with our partners that will also be appointing, that in essence is our way of making sure that the city's expectations are heard in the room for this new board creation.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'll take it one step farther. Under the infusion fund, the city set aside 1% for admin. It's a little bit more than 1. I don't think it's 2% under this arrangement. But part of it is now you will get an annual accounting of the performance of all of these organizations that are receiving funds, both from the city's perspective and the county's perspective. So again, this is designed to have this accountability. I'll say one more thing, what I think really makes this unique and makes it good. Good, bad, or indifferent, there was a cultural plan, and I think you, Councilmember Mayfield, went to many of the public meetings. And that cultural plan, which the city paid for, I think with the foundation, came up with 8 recommendations. This body is really working on 2, funding as well as governance. This body will make sure that those other 6 recommendations are actually being addressed somewhere in the ecosystem. Doesn't have to be the public sector, it could be the private sector, it could be, other grants. So it is much broader than the discussion tonight, but the legacy of that report has to live somewhere with accountability of all the pillars, not just 2.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Ajmira?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Mr. Jones, as part of 2024-2025 budget that was approved, we had allocated $2 million out of 11 to go towards individual artists and creatives. So I know the funding hasn't gone out yet, even though it was allocated. I guess why do we need this structure in place to get the funding out? Because there are individual artists and creatives that I've heard from. They said, doesn't matter what governing structure you have in place, we need to make sure we get enough funding. There are so many artists, their livelihood depends on some of this funding. And, we are 9 months since the budget was approved and the funding hasn't gone out. I know at some point we talked about Charlotte is Creative should help us get those $2 million out. And then we talked about the RFP process, and the RFP process should help us get the funding out, and that's great. But why there has not been any progress in helping us get those $2 million out? Because that was already approved.
Sure, and my wife tells me not to over-explain, but I'll over-explain just a little bit, okay? So going back in time, so there is no ASC. The ASC, as you knew it, is now the ASCC. It's a different organization. Did I get that right? It's a different organization. And so we thought if all of this imploded, right, if the county didn't do their part or what have you. We wanted to have a vehicle to get the 11 million out because the infusion fund existed for 3 years, and then there was something new that was going to happen July 1. So we thought, let's do Charlotte as creative because they had made grants before. We absolutely positively stopped because you asked us to do an RFP. So we're going through an RFP process for this 2 million, and unfortunately, RFPs take time. And so that's where we are, and that's why the money hasn't gone out, because we were asked to stop.
Okay, so let me just make sure. I know that the council asked you to do the RFP process back in October, right?
Or maybe a little later than that, but yes.
Okay. So am I hearing that RFP takes 3 months?
If you're lucky. Yeah. If you're lucky.
Okay. So what I hear, the RFP is already out there. The process has started?
The process has started. I don't know if the RFP has actually gone out, but the RFP is in the process of being drafted. And if it has gone out, it's gone out. I'm not sure that it has.
Right. So I guess there are two separate issues here. One is the governing, and one is that's $2 million that is for individual artists. And there is, they're mutually exclusive because the RFP, whoever we select, whether it's Charlotte is Creative or other partner or combination, will help us get those funds out. So all the independent individual artists that have reached out, I just want to make sure that this governing structure is not stopping the funding. It is not getting in the way of individual artists getting the funds. Because individual artists did make calls. I got some calls saying, hey, I haven't gotten the funding, and it sounded like that this governing decision that we are going to make today was getting in the way, but that's not the case.
Nothing to do
So
with it.
I just want to make sure that those who are not supporting it does not mean that we are holding this $2 million back. $2 million have been approved by this council. It's going to go out. The RFP process has started. I would like us to get an update on where the RFP is, where we are in the selection process, and when individual artists would anticipate their funds, right? If we can get a timeline of that, so as individual artists had reached out to us, we can tell them this is what the timeline looks like. For an example, Ann Lambert reached out. She does a lot of shows, and she's having to pay out of pocket for some of these venues because she hasn't gotten funding from the city, which she has gotten in the past. And I think that's unfortunate. But if let's get those funds out, regardless of what happens here tonight. And I just want to make sure. So you said it's 1% fee, management fee that foundation is charging.
Yeah, so let's back up. On the 9 million, during the infusion fund, it was 1%. It's a little bit more. I think now it's like 150,000, but some of that is literally because it's cutting checks and putting the checks out. Another piece of it is to assess the program in general. So it's good to have some, to Councilmember Mayfield's point, some level of accountability and assessment of the performance of how the money is going out. Now, I will tell you this, when we put out the RFP for the 2 million, there's no way in the world there's going to be an admin fee around 1%, okay?
Right.
It's maybe 15, but that is just par for the course when you have some of these grant-making organizations run grants.
Right. No, certainly, I think Foundation has a track record of getting the funds out in a timely manner. They have helped us with ARPA funds in the past, getting those funds out to small businesses in a very timely manner with a very low management fee. And that's great. I mean, 1% is not heard of in that industry. So it's certainly a very good use of our taxpayers' dollars. But, also want to keep this in mind. When it comes to individual artists, it's very different because you're working one-on-one. It takes a lot more resources versus you're working with, you're writing a $1 million check to an institution, right? So there is a lot more work involved. So obviously the management fee will be a lot higher for those individual artists and groups that are getting $50,000 or $100,000 checks, right? So certainly there is more performance metrics work that's involved, so I get it, the management fee will be a lot higher in that regard. Other question often comes up when it comes to individual artists is that this $2 million that's been approved by this council in last year's budget, does it go to the same organizations who have historically received the funding, or can the new organization be eligible for the funding?
So I guess two things. It would be the latter, but I think it's important to start off where we were with Charlotte is Creative. The RFP is very important, the way that it's structured, or the engagement is very important because the concept was take some of the themes from the cultural plan to make sure that there's more collaboration. I know it's been a long time, but I think that was one of the first things that the ad hoc work group talked about is you can't do the same thing. How can you make sure that you have collaboration between some of the bigs and some of the smalls? I would say, I think it's important to say this, going forward, the 11 million would go over. The 9 million would be hardwired. 2 million would be associated with other artists and organizations. And I think that's important because you have board seats because that board is going to make determinations about how money is dispersed. And right now, the county's got like 10 million associated with it, or some portion of that, and we have 2. So it's important to realize that sending it all over, 9 hardwired, 2 not hardwired, to some of the points that you made, is the reason that you have appointments on this board.
Yeah, as we make appointments to the board, it will be very important that we have diverse representation, especially representation from individual artists as well as institutions that operate in our city-owned buildings, as well as those who work in this industry. I just want to make sure I get clarification on this.
Up for collaboratives, there was open calls, so it's really designed after the way the infusion fund worked for 3 years.
Okay. Yep, that's all. Thank you.
Any further discussion or question, Mr. Bakari?
Just a comment. I'm struggling here with this, but I just want to remind everyone of what the table stakes were when we started going down this path years ago. Our objective, at least my objective and my work towards it, was to disrupt the status quo. And the status quo at that time when we came in was basically a mixture of the private sector over the previous decade having reduced their commitment and accountability and ownership in funding these places, which when they do that brings along its own accountability of where they're going and how they're growing, paired with the fact that the ASC as an organization was just, it was something that I thought was a bit unhealthy as to how the money was being deployed, what the priorities were, in the sense that it felt more like, in addition to the overhead, there was just a lot of subsidizing of things. And the objective here was, we'll put more money in order to fix the status quo, which is get the private sector back involved, push things to become sustainable where it's a seed funding mechanism to revive and revitalize a sustainable arts and culture organization. So I'm struggling to which way to vote right now because I don't think that this is the answer, even though the foundation being involved is a step forward. There's still just all this stuff that leads me to believe it's still going to remain a larger dollar amount subsidy mechanism that won't incentivize sustainability and growth and evolving out of subsidy for the arts and culture organization and a, re-excitement of the private sector. But on the other side, I don't know if I should vote no. Maybe I should vote yes, because there's clearly just nothing happening to change that. So we can either I really truly at this moment don't know how to vote, because if I vote no and somehow I'm the sixth vote or whatever to make it not happen, I don't know that anything is going to change offline. But so maybe that's convincing me out loud to just give it a try and cross my fingers that we don't nominate and appoint a whole bunch of, while I agree with the diversity of views and all that stuff is good, we need business people on this board that can figure out, almost like this is a business, how they're going to give seed money for opportunities, not and subsidize the costs that are ongoing costs and are never going to change, or never going to inspire the community and sustainability to all get behind it. So I don't know the answer, but I just know one plus is the foundation's involved. One minus is we're going to just appoint a board like we appoint boards. It's going to be full of people that aren't going to be equipped to get the job done, and we're dumping more money on top of it. So not to be the glass of cold water on everything. I don't even know if I convince myself what I'm going to do. I need to think for the next 30 seconds as it relates to what the lesser of these two evils are.
I mean, the only part. Right, Ms. Johnson. I'm sorry, Mr. Driggs had his hand up. Mr. Driggs, Ms. Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, two things. I don't think that we should, if it is approved, that we should cross our fingers and hope it works and pray there are no unintended consequences. Mr. Jones, you mentioned the infusion fund and the follow-up and the accountability. I think we should be sure that we get a survey from the community. I know there's going to be accountability of those artists, but we should hear from the public to make sure that this plan is working. It's something new. I think that we should be intentional about reevaluating this plan next year, because it is a change. So the next council, if we could incorporate this in the plan to do a follow-up, is this working? Some benchmarks of what changes we'd like to see. How is this different from the ASC? So I think that rather than voting for it and seeing if it works, we should be intentional about following up to make sure that it worked. Secondly, we talked about organizations that were awarded in June and still haven't received their funding. And we talked about that in the earlier meeting. That's just not acceptable for a small business. When you're a small business, you budget based on funding. There are organizations that are getting loans to meet payroll because they anticipated $100,000 or whatever that number is from the city. So we need to ensure that these checks are out. We need to know why. We need to know, as Councilmember Ashmira asked, we need a list of organizations that haven't gotten their funding. But 9 months into a budget year for a small organization can shut organizations down. So I think we as the city need to be more accountable to our constituents and to our small businesses. It's a struggle to run a small business. So if we can just make sure that's done, I think that we will be doing a true service for our organizations and for our citizens.
So, because that's come up a couple times, I want to clarify a few things. The first thing, we had some ARPA funds that we had to do revenue replacement with. And the moment we did that, and I'm speaking specifically about the digital divide, digital inclusion, the arrangements that we had to stop those arrangements and begin fresh with the RFP process. So that's not us. That is what we were informed we had to do. The other thing, which I think this will help your decision, I guess, last month, some of the organizations that haven't gotten their money, and Marie's going to do a run for me tonight, we had never had an arrangement with them ever. So we were starting from scratch. And so when you don't have an arrangement with the organization, you have to establish a contract with them. And so some of this is just due diligence by the staff. I don't believe it's many, but what we'll do is see who has not received funds from some of the outside partners that came during the budget straw votes.
I got a
Okay,
clarifying question for you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Driggs was next, and he had asked to speak, so then we can come back to the order.
Those who haven't
that we
spoken?
have. Right, well, he has not spoken, and that's exactly why he's being recognized.
Who's next? Let's go.
All right, Mr.
So this has gone on for years, right? And I just want to remind everybody, we had a working group that was created. We started going over what our criteria were, what are we trying to accomplish. It was clear that the old model didn't work. It was clear that $3.5 million of grant money to the ASC was really not accomplishing what we wanted to do and was leaving, as Mr. Bukhari suggested, a big deficit because of the decline in private money. So we started down a road, and then we said, we're going to create an arts and culture plan. And while we did, we had the infusion fund. And a huge amount of work went into the arts and culture plan, including interviews and input from council members, community outreach, and we established some principles of what we wanted to do. So we wanted to be sure that we had secure funding for legacy organizations. We wanted to have diversity and equity. We wanted to include small artists. And we had during the infusion fund, $12 million a year. Now we've got $21 million a year. And the thing we're losing sight of is this is amazing. Compared to what was going on, we have finally, after years and years, we have tackled this question. If we don't adopt this, we're putting ourselves back almost to square one. It was clear the whole time we were talking about it, there was never going to be unanimity. And there just wasn't. There were too many different points of view, too many concerns. But if you go back and reread the Arts and Culture Plan, which will be sort of the guidepost, the charter for our commitment of public funds, I think you'll find that just about everybody's concerns are acknowledged and addressed in there. So I'm concerned with what happens if we don't take this step, which does not deprive us at any date in the future from revisiting, examining how it's going, changing this, cutting off the funding, that you can't bind future councils, but we need to do something. And I don't think this is bad. I think this is something that evolved from a huge amount of work, an evolution, and I would just hope that we can take this step, and if we have to, continue the conversation and make changes as needed in the future. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We need a motion. We need to decide what.
Move to approve.
We have a motion?
Second.
A second.
Okay,
We
you
need
got
a
it.
second.
That's a second.
We have a second
That was
here.
already done.
The two people, the people that were in the meeting, actually. All right, so,
Are we still in discussion?
yes, we are. All right, so I believe we have had people that would want to speak. We'll just go around the dais here. Mr. Bukhari, followed by Ms. Mayfield.
I just need a quick clarification question to the manager. I stand by all the comments I made before, but obviously there's the two additional wild cards. One, if it's voted down, what are we going to actually go do that's different than before? And I'm pragmatic enough to say if that answer is nothing, then that's the answer. But then the complexity of the county's money and the timeline with the foundation and all this. So, I mean, I don't want to vote yes for this, but I also just don't want to sit around and do nothing. And if there's a roll of the dice where the foundation plus the county money gives this thing a shot and we treat these board appointments very seriously, is there some, I'm trying to not give you like a question you can't answer.
Sure. I'll give it a shot.
All right.
I do believe this is the best of all options, and I believe it's a good option. Just look at what happened in 267 earlier. Collaboration between the city and the county. I'm not so sure 4 years ago we would have ever thought we would be at this place. And you have the Foundation for the Carolinas involved also with a level of oversight, much like I'm Read Charlotte and some of these other organizations. The inverse is, which I don't recommend at all, what we used to do in the past. The county has its money, the city has its money, and there's no opportunity for collaboration. And I would hope we don't go down that path.
Do you believe that this approach gives us a more than meaningful shot at 2 to 5 years from now, having an outcome where funded into smalls are graduating to a sustainable lifestyle of arts contribution to the city? The private sector increases in its, do you believe those are the kinds of things that this approach can generate?
Yeah, absolutely. The private sector, good, bad, or indifferent, basically said that, you can say they, said that they don't want to get into these individual organizations' operations. There are other things they'd like to do, like sponsor events or, be the key sponsor. So the concept really makes sense. It is consistent with the report. It's not a bad place for us to be.
And the foundation's going to quarterback that in this model?
The
foundation is going to quarterback that coordination?
So the new branded ASCC will be responsible for this plan. But think about this. You have appointments to this board, the county has appointments to this board, and the Foundation for the Carolinas has appointments to this board. I think that's where the accountability will reside.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Mayfield?
I just had a clarifying question either for the manager or for Marie, because I think I'm hearing two different conversations regarding funding of our partners. Because some of our financial partners, we had a conversation about, but manager, remind me, the $9 million that we originally started with out of this 11, that $9 million has already.
It's gone.
That's gone.
In,
so this $2 million, out of this $2 million, that was going to be a $2 million grant that has not been promised to anyone yet.
Correct.
So I just wanted to make sure, for the sake of the minutes, that we're having very transparent conversations when anyone in our community reaches out and say they haven't received funding, of which I brought it up as well. But our financial partners, that's a different, which we need to figure out why, because it shouldn't be in January. But for tonight's conversation, for Arts and Council, ASCC, this $11 million, $9 million is already done, allocated. We're now having this back and forth on $2 million in grants that have not been promised, allocated, because we don't have the RFP that went out, because we still have to do that process. So I just wanted clarification.
Absolutely. There could be organizations that benefited from the infusion fund the last 3 years. This is not the infusion fund. It's something totally different.
I just wanted clarification on that. So you said you got a motion in a second.
As Ms. Ashmira, did you,
Right,
or
but
Ms.
they have not been
Swatlington?
promised nothing.
Yeah, but they
So
can
they
apply.
lying.
Ms. Swatlington?
They lying. Anybody that get not paid.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just a couple of thoughts as I listen to this discussion. I share many of the concerns that I've heard, particularly from Mr. Bakari, as it relates to what started this discussion, what were the original goals. I have not seen any of the original goals actually be addressed in this situation outside of an operations transfer of we don't have to make individual decisions about an organization. That feels like perhaps is an answer for staff. For me, it doesn't feel like it's delivering better for the community as a whole, and I certainly have not heard anything that would lead me to believe we have a sustainable arts model that addresses any of the things that we initially discussed. We've seen this 3 times. We've sent it back at least twice, and we keep getting the same thing. That gives me no confidence that we're going to do anything different going forward. We've had this conversation about living documents. We said the same thing about the 2040 plan. And here we are now hosed because we've got a Senate bill that doesn't even allow us to do the things that we knew we should have done on the front end of the 2040 plan. So I don't have a high degree of confidence that we're going to take this and make it better after we voted on it and moved on to the next topic of the day. When I think about us having board appointments, well, we've had board appointments before. And just as Councilmember Mayfield mentioned, I have not seen that mean anything in a real way as it relates to us actually getting results down the line. So for me, it just feels like it misses the boat on virtually every item. I get that there are some things that we feel like we're getting from the county in this deal, but frankly, we don't need to get in this deal for the county to pony up $3 million for something. That's a county choice that they should be making, frankly, regardless. So I too don't want to do nothing. I don't want to continue down the same path, but this feels to me like a reinvestment in the same approach that we were taking before, except now we have less opportunity to have a direct decision-making space. To me, this represents the broader conversation around the arts as we think about funding. I saw the footnote that I asked about as it relates to finding other dollars, whether they're tourism, rental car tax, otherwise, to address arts and culture, because quiet as it seems to be kept, arts and culture is a tourism draw to this community. And so there's absolutely a reason to have conversation there. Does it mean that there doesn't require work to go do at the state level? Of course not. But what I'm not seeing here is an answer that says, let's go innovate. It's let's break it down and put it back together in virtually the same way that it looked before under another name. And I don't think that's going to get us to the next level of where we're trying to go as a city, not just in arts, but in policy in general.
So could I? All right, so what I'd like to do is frame this in a way that maybe we can just lock into the main thing. Hey, Monica Holmes, I didn't see you earlier. Okay, I would say that the infusion fund was wildly successful. It was a partnership between the city and the private sector that put $12 million into the ecosystem over a 3-year period. You had a board, 18 members. You appointed some of the board members. The private sector appointed some of the board members. They ran grants, much like this is proposed, that you had no decision-making over. You left it up to the people that you appointed. This is based on the success from the infusion fund, which I think for 3 years, no one around the dais complained about it.
That's because we were under the impression we were going to have something different at the end of the 3 years.
But the infusion fund was something that the artists and the organizations, the bigs, the smalls, the mediums, thought worked. So you have a plan. The plan suggested this, 2 of the 8 pillars, as well as you have the history of the infusion fund. So I just want to make sure this isn't that different in terms of having appointments where your appointees are making decisions about grants that go out.
I think that I can't remember if it was Ms. Ajmira, but I too have gotten calls saying, are we going to do funding and for the, and I think right now, if we decide that we're going to do this, there has to be some pathway to get it done, and this is what's being put on the table. But if we are not going to have the opportunity to help the people that are young, I mean, people that are really saying the smalls, we call them, or the individuals, pretty soon they won't need this because we wouldn't have a place and a way to give the money or funding to them. So I think we have a real dilemma, and I don't know how we're going to address. So, but we do have a motion on the floor.
Mayor,
And
I'm the only one that haven't spoke, I think. I just want to say something real fast. I hadn't spoke. I had my hand on.
Okay, yes. Everyone else has had an opportunity to speak at least once or twice, but you haven't, so please.
Right, I do. I just want to, well.
You haven't spoken.
Not on this topic.
Oh, him.
Oh, Mr. Mitchell.
I have spoken.
The arts and science and culture, it's very important, and we need to do something. But for me, if I go back to our strategy session, I really want to try to see how we can come up with some type of viable solution to move forward. But there's a lot of confusion, and so with me, it just further disturbs and confuses me. So I just want to be able to be a team player, but there's there's a tug of war going on, and how do we come to some type of resolution where we can move forward for what's best in the community and for our constituents? But I do hear my colleagues, and there is some very valid concerns there. So how do we move forward and try to close this at the dais and be able to do more as we move forward? So, Mr. Mitchell, have you spoke? I haven't heard from you. I'm just trying to figure out what to do, and I want to be respectful, but I'm also trying to remember us moving together forward as a functionable council, like we said we would do at our strategy meeting. So I'm trying to just implement those skills, and I'm having a difficult time doing that.
I think it's a question about, right now, the short term. Are we going to support the arts and culture people for this time? And Ms. Watlington is true. We've been doing this and doing it. So it's on us. I mean, it's truly on us for not having this kind of discussion. But we have got, and I understand what you're saying. You're not quite sure because of all the dynamics and the sidebars and all of that, which I understand. So, but I think the question is, maybe we don't have any what choice do we want? Do we want to have our artists be able to get grants for this fiscal year? Or will we go back and start thinking of another structural way to deal with our artists?
So question to you, Mayor, if we do not give the artists any money, right now we vote no, then what would happen? I'm just curious. Mr. Jones?
So, yes, Councilmember Brown, if you chose not to be a part of the structure, you could still have an RFP, you could still get the 2 million out.
Yep,
If you chose not to do this.
you can see here.
And how long would that take, Mr. Jones, to do?
I'm not so sure how long it would take to get it out. I believe we can get it out this fiscal year. So while I do recommend that you be a part of the structure, they are two separate issues. You could choose a different pathway to get the 2 million out.
Right.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. There's been debate. Already, everybody has had an opportunity to speak.
Oh, I have a question, though. I need a follow-up, because Mr. Jones...
Mr. Attorney, could you...
I know.
We have rules, okay? And everybody has spoken, and the mayor has said is closing the discussion,
It's
and
time
I
to
think
close
we
the
need to live by
discussion and
that.
move on. So we're going to go with...
The only requirement of your rules is that it allows after a motion, everyone to speak after the motion, and everyone has spoken, then it's upon the chair to decide when the debate ends, unless there's a motion to call the question as well, to call the previous question.
So the mayor decides whether we want to continue the discussion or not.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that's how it works.
Okay. So I think we need to go ahead and vote on this, and the decision of the board will be what it is. So we have a motion and a recommendation from the committee to approve this item. And so for the arts, for the Arts, Science, and Culture Governance Board. So we have the motion that says approve the Jobs and Economic Development Committee recommendations to participate in the new Arts, Science, and Culture Governance Board. So all in favor of that, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That passes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
It's the right
You
thing
may
to
want
do.
to record all
I'm
opposed.
sorry. Of the noes, who is in opposition? Ms. Watlington is in opposition, Ms. Johnson as well.
No alternatives.
And that's the
All right.
problem, you just wait until
So the
there's
next
nothing.
item on our agenda is making our roads safer, a cross-jurisdictional study grant.
Mayor, move approval actions A, B, and C.
Second. We have a motion and a second for item 11A, B, and C. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Molina. Anyone else? Any other questions or comments about item 11? All right, hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
We had a motion and a second.
Yes, we have a motion and a second. So the next one is item 12, Comprehensive Safety Action Study Grant.
Mayor, move for approval, action A, B, and C.
Second.
All right, we have a
Wait a minute, hold
motion
on.
and a second.
You're doing A, B, and C all in one? Okay.
You can do it all in one, yes, because it's all for the
yeah.
same
Okay, cool.
work. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. All in favor, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? That's unanimous. The next item is item 13, Norfolk Southern O-Line Corridor Acquisition Financing.
Mayor, move for approval, action A and B.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? All right. Anyone opposed? Okay, the next item is item 14, Sharon Point Apartments Naturally Occurring Affordable Housing Preservation and Rental Subsidy Support.
Move to approve action A, B, and C.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So something that I am happy about, thanks to the work of my colleagues over the summer, Dr. Watlington, as well as Councilmember Driggs, we were able to clarify some language moving forward, and this will be one of the first projects in 2025 under that new language would basically set aside. I personally would love 30 years. I'm not a fan of 20, but I recognize that here's the opportunity for us to move forward with NOAA, and I also want to make sure that my colleagues take note that there is a bullet point in here regarding the county's commitment regarding the subsidies. We do know, it's on the second page, there's a bullet point on it if you haven't had a chance to see it, but we do know the county has identified that they are looking at some budget shortfalls. This discussion for A, B, and C tonight is not hindered if the county are not able, even though I do believe that they have already identified this line item in their budget for this particular project, but if there is a shortfall, we're still able to move forward, and we still have our commitments as far as mainly when we have a displacement event, which unfortunately we are seeing because of other properties. Here kicks off the beginning of making sure that we have some different opportunities for our residents. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mayfield. All right, Ms. Molina?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I just want to say how it, and first of all, I'm actually, I spoke to my colleague, Ms. Mayfield, and she has some concerns, and it sounds like she's gotten her questions answered.
Just giving it.
To some degree. So I'm excited about that, but I want to bring up some highlights. Mark Etheridge has been doing some outstanding work across this city in serving our community members that are in need of affordable options. And this particular opportunity is for the 30% AMI and below. I mean, I'm talking like some of our community members that have the highest needs would be able to be served with this particular opportunity, along with a number of other things that I don't want to read through, but I want to lift up, the Ascent Group and the work that they're doing, and I am so incredibly happy to support this. And it's funny because when I was speaking to Mark over the weekend, we were talking, and he even takes phone calls from us when we have someone in need. I mean, I'm sitting here whispering to Councilmember Johnson, if we identify somebody who has a need, he'll take our phone call, and he'll look through the portfolio, he'll reach out to people, he'll, attempt to try to meet that need on a personal basis, and I think that speaks to the human being that he is and the group that he works with is. So like I said, I'm happy to support this. And I ask my colleagues that you support me in this endeavor as well.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. All in favor, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Is there any, I don't think that we have anyone that's in opposition. So this is, I think, our last item on the agenda. We have nominations, that's not on our agenda. We're now going to talk to the clerk or allow the clerk. Tonight, we consider nominations to various boards, I think a number of them. And we're not going to read them at the dais. Tomorrow, the clerk will email everyone the results, and these candidates will be considered at the next business meeting. Is that right, Madam Clerk? Did I miss something?
Those persons that have 6 or more nominations can be appointed upon a motion, second, and a vote, if you so choose, tonight.
Okay,
And they won't come back at the following meeting.
okay. So,
There was a question.
Melina?
Madam Mayor, if I may, one of the nominations in particular, item number 15, is for a community member in District 5, Mr. John Holmes. He lost his life last month on the Bicycle Advisory Committee. John was absolutely one of the sweetest, committed, most heartfelt human beings I've experienced in my service to the community. And one in particular, I had to sit still when we were making the elections to know that we would be replacing him, because it's not really a replacement, but it's just one of those people in the community that when you lose them, you feel it real deep. And so number 15 is really special to me to see.
Thank you for that, and appreciate so much to have the opportunity for you to say these remarks for him. So with that, do we have a motion to adjourn, or we got to read the 6? We got to read the people that got 6. Sorry,
For the
Stephanie.
Bicycle Advisory Committee, the 2, Isaac Oyer and Andy Zhu, both received 9 nominations. For the Charlotte Business Inclusion Advisory Committee, the incumbent Candace Gaddy received 8 nominations, and she is for a 3-year term. For the at-large representative for Prime Construction Company for Business Inclusion, the incumbent Jason Deans has 9 nominations. For the representative recommended by the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, Kim Lang received 9 nominations. For the representative of the National Association of Women Business Owners, Chris Jarrett, the incumbent, received 9 nominations. For the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Public Access Corporation, Elisa Glover received 8 nominations. For the Historic Landmarks Commission, Christina Benton received 7 nominations. And the others will come back to you. The Public Transit Advisory Committee will come back to you at a future time, and any others not presented will be at your next business meeting.
Mayor, I make a motion, we move by acclamation those who receive more than 6.
Second. We have a motion and a second, and no discussion. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. And we'll have the other ones coming back at our next meeting. To adjourn.
Second.
We had a motion to adjourn?
We are, I'm asking now, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I just made a
You
motion.
said it so quietly.
Let's adjourn.
We didn't hear you.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. This meeting is
And a
adjourned.
second?
Thank you, and a second, all of that.